Monday, December 16th, 2019. Call the Charlotte Select Board meeting to order. Are there any adjustments to the agenda?
There's one additional Thompson point lease that came in for renewal since the agenda was issued.
Okay. Uh, 531 agenda item, the wastewater disposal ordinances for the West Charlotte Village. Dave Marshall is back again. Thank you for returning.
Good evening.
Were there some questions that you were getting answers to from last time, or this is a continuation of the ordinance?
I think it was more a continuation, if I believe. I think you had pointed out that there was a mathematical error in the computation of the available wastewater flows that I think can be edited with staff fairly readily. Other than that, we spent a lot of time discussing generally the concepts and the intent of the ordinances, and out of all that, ran out of time, and here we are again.
So as far as we are in the process, there was an advisory motion at a select board meeting a few years ago for the select board to look into the village wastewater options. A subcommittee was formed that met for a little over 2 years, going on 3 years now, and came up with an exhaustive list of options, which boiled down to these two documents, a sewer use ordinance and a sewer allocation ordinance. The select board spent a good chunk of the summer and fall going over options and kind of customizing this document with concerns and input. It's since gone to General Counsel legal review and come back with some edited suggestions that were accepted by the committee for the most part. And from the discussion that came up last meeting, it sounds like if the select board decides to enact these two ordinances, there would still be some heavy lifting needed to get them to be effective in generating and calculating an appropriate fee schedule.
That is correct. Yeah, I think there's a public policy component with regards to how the impact fees or connection fees would be developed by the select board, and there have been a number of committees that have worked on this particular issue, and they've each come up with their own ideas. The most current thoughts from the committee was to basically try to create a balance of both initial recoupment of historical costs that have been incurred by the town as part of the initial connection fee, and then to basically have the user fees weighted a little bit higher to reflect the use of the Burns property as part of that particular cost sharing, or basically usage fees. And that being the background there, that's, I don't want to get ahead of the issue, but nonetheless there are a number of ideas that the committee is very happy to discuss when it's time to basically adopt that particular, or discuss that platform.
Do you know how long the Thompson's Point septic system has been operational and working? I remember it.
The bond, 20-year bond was paid off about 4 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. So it's been about 20, I would say about that length, a little over 20 years.
20 years. So as far as fee schedule goes, we have that institutional framework of what seems to have been a very effective fee schedule. So
right.
The town also has that to look at as far as a responsible way to manage and levy fees for the long-term maintenance of
Yes,
it.
a lot of experience directly at the town as far as the Thompson Point committees, working through exactly what it takes each year to basically cover not only their costs, but also create a sinking fund that will allow for future maintenance items to be readily integrated into a management plan, as opposed to, oh my gosh, didn't realize that we were going to have this large expense. So they've been very aggressive in regards to their planning, to basically make sure that there was a rainy day fund to basically deal with those particular types of maintenance requirements.
Do you have any idea off the top of your head how many gallons per day that?
I'm sorry?
Do you have any idea how many gallons per day that system is approved for?
20,000, I believe.
20,000?
Yes.
And the one the town currently has is 6,500
That's correct.
gallons per day. So it's a much larger system than
It
what the
is.
town is currently managing here.
Yeah, it's more complicated as far as the components of that particular system and the fact that they have a pre-treatment system that basically deals with all the flows from all of the camps that then get sent out to 4 different mound systems as part of the system out there.
Yeah, I think
Just,
that's a,
I guess, additional comparison, there are about 170 connections to the Thompson's Point. Is that between 170 and?
I think you're in the right neighborhood.
Neighborhood. And so it's a bigger, more connections, more flows.
bigger, you have to shut it down to start it up every year, which is a big
Seasonal.
cost. There's a few things that are similar, but even the pumps there are much more complicated than what we got, yeah.
The town hires an operator for that system.
Well, I made this comment last time, and I would just make it again. I understand rate design, and there's absolutely, there's a plethora of ways to design the rates so that they're fully compensatory to the town, including forward-looking and cost recovery. And just what I think everyone has said, these will not be free connections. We will set when we get there, we'll set the prices in ways that compensate both for the capital costs and for the running costs.
Is there more discussion on any of the substance of the ordinances?
Being on the committee, I'm done.
Too familiar.
Yes.
You're wasted.
I'm glad.
Well, if there's no more informal discussion, is there a motion?
Sure. I'll make a motion to approve the sewer use ordinance and the sewer allocation ordinance.
And I will second those motions.
Is there any further discussion?
Just a question on procedure. We approve this, then there's a waiting period. And then if it's appealed, there's a vote. If there's not appealed, it goes into effect.
So I did it's kind of a 2-bar graph. There's 2 statutes that would kind of be intersecting each other. One is a 45-day period before a town ordinance goes into effect, from the date that it is enacted. And there is a 60-day window in which an appeal by individuals in the town, if they get 5% of the voting roll, they can appeal any ordinance in town, and they have 60 days to do. Not only do they have 60 days to do it, a vote must occur within 60 days of the submission of that appeal.
I believe the appeal period is 45 days, and
45
then it goes
days.
into effect 60 days
60 days from there.
from the adoption.
I heard 40, but someday at some point, so we just need to
40?
Yeah, well, based on what the notice, I asked the town attorney to look into it, and he indicated there's 44 days with which to submit a petition. If no petition is submitted, it goes into effect within 60 days. And if a petition is submitted, the select board has to hold a vote within 30 days, I believe.
So the real problem is going to be whether this dovetails with town meeting.
Right.
Or whether we end up having a separate vote either before or after, before or after town meeting. Right, Dean?
I think it would, yeah, I think the only possible risk would be that approving it today could set up a window if a petition was submitted tomorrow.
Sure.
Where a vote would be required to happen before town meeting.
Yes.
By state statute. So one thought I had would be to enact this at a date that prevents that possibility from happening. And it would be a date counting backwards from town meeting, so that no matter what, unknown mechanisms are exercised, that the select board could ensure that town meeting could be the date at which that vote occurred. Does that
Here.
make sense? So counting backwards,
You're counting in public.
yeah, and on the fly.
Shoes off.
Yeah. So really, we need to count backwards 45 days from town meeting. That would,
That's the appeal period. If it's a,
I think though you also have to give a certain amount of notice to have it be on the ballot
for the warning.
for the warning. So if you guys have to respond within 30 days, then my guess would be that maybe it's like 74 days before town meeting, or, something, so it falls within the 30-day window, but there's appropriate time to warn. But I think you'd have to, Christina,
I think the warning minimum is what we'd be looking at, not the maximum, as far as that window. Otherwise, it gets us outside of the,
so she had mentioned during one of my many meetings on this that typically they would come in by the beginning of February, but this was in passing a year and a half ago or something, so I verified.
January.
30th.
So if we enacted it, help me out here, on the, is it a week for a warning? We have to have a
15
hearing?
days.
15 days, so it's 2 weeks on top of 44 days would be the minimum, and the 30 would be the maximum. 58 days. That would be Monday, January 6th. It's really Sunday, January 5th. Would be the 58 days. So I guess the discussion for the board is that an important variable that we want to plan for?
So you would, in theory, have a special meeting on that day to approve this, or do you approve it effective that day? or-
I would think we approve it effective that date.
Does that count legally? I guess I don't know.
I don't know. We have to recognize that there's a lot of discussion, and there's not unanimity in the community about the outcome here. So we need to be straightforward and fair with both sides in terms of what they're expecting. It would be great if we could do this so that we didn't have to have a special vote, but if that's what we have to do, that's what we'll do, right? So.
Town meeting's good.
Town meeting's great.
Town meetings. So if we pass this today, which is the 16th, and someone were to appeal it tomorrow or sometime this week, we would.
I think that would trigger a requirement for a vote prior to town meeting.
Prior to town meeting,
Yep.
okay. But we're not our next scheduled board meeting isn't until,
January 13th.
yeah. And if we deferred it till then, we would pass the town meeting date.
If they had submitted it right away, it could be warned for town meeting.
Okay.
Pleasure of the board. I mean, the other thing we could do is vote on the ordinance now and ask anyone interested in submitting a petition to do so at a time that allows it to be warned in the town report and to be voted on town meeting.
But is that gonna be, can that be done if somebody submits their petition and they only have, and once it's submitted, it's gotta be held within 30 days?
Well,
You don't, do they actually have a choice to say, okay, I'll extend that to 45 days so it gets done during town meeting?
well, the choice would be to not submit it until later in the window.
So then it becomes a strategic or tactical issue on their part. Are they going to be better off with a separate vote, or better off to have it at town meeting? So that's just, and I don't think we can't control that very
Are
well.
we still having the other meeting in April?
Just a vote.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
But it could happen during that meeting.
It would have to, it'd either be before town meeting or at
I
town
mean,
meeting.
if it was enacted later on in January, it
Oh,
might be able to get
it
warned
could.
for town meeting, and if not, it's only 30 days to the April, and it could be,
My only personal concern with that is that vote count has almost gotten so low, it's matched the attendance at town meeting. Whereas the actual votes at town meeting has been, the highest voter turnout that we've had besides presidential elections.
Okay.
Peter?
So it's my understanding that a petition couldn't be, or can't be submitted until the ordinances have gone into effect, right? So assuming that's the case, then it seems to me it would make more sense to everybody's benefit to vote on it tonight, stating that it would go into effect on whatever that date was. So that gives everybody in town the most amount of time in terms of those who perhaps are thinking about petitioning, and it gives them plenty of more time actually than if you waited. And you also, I think it's fair to say we probably get a better turnout at town meeting as opposed to a separate vote, which we had not too long ago for the town plan, and of course the turnout was not so good. So.
I tend to agree, I agree too.
Yeah, and I think because we want to maximize the input and views from members, from town members.
And really, from our standpoint of potentiality,
Yeah.
we have no control if there's a petition submitted or not. And I haven't heard from anyone directly that they would be appealing this. So to me, it's, my guess is as good as anybody's. So I guess that would be, would you amend the motion to have the ordinances go into effect on January 6th?
That sounds like a wonderful idea. As long as it's still second.
I'll second it.
Okay.
Is there any more discussion? Robert?
I have a question. Why can't you go to the voters in March and ask them if they're willing to add the children's center and the health center to the municipal septic system and skip the ordinance? This ordinance I have a real problem with, and you're probably going to get a petition. But I don't have a big problem with the children's center hooking up. I think it has public good. It would seem to me this part should have been done much sooner. We should not be playing with dates and stuff like this, simply because it just doesn't work that way well. Everybody wants to have a vote at town meeting. You guys are in charge. You're the legislative leaders. You set a date for a vote. When this whole process started, it was 20 people left at town meeting, and it was an advisory motion. I mean, that's all it was. And so there's been no mandate from the people to do something.
I hear your point.
Other than 2.5 years to show up to a meeting.
Well, and I hear your point. As far as the town giving permission to any entity to hook up to the septic, this ordinance does not permit that. This ordinance allows a process for applications to prove a need based on metrics and priorities that are really clear and fair to anyone within this district. So it's not picking individual entities, it's a municipal system, and it's a 3-step process that can be denied in 3 separate stages. So to me, I don't see this as giving license to any one group access to a town asset. I think this is the fairest, most comprehensive system for allowing anyone in town to have their input, not just at one town meeting, but all the time, in perpetuity, whenever an application comes before the town. And so I think it's a more comprehensive way for people who have concerns about specific applications to voice it throughout the year, every year, than just, one town meeting for one request.
I don't necessarily agree with what you just said, but I understand what you're saying. And it's really hard to make decisions. I can't imagine how you can make a decision without actually knowing the numbers that it's going to cost to make this facility operational, I mean the septic system. So without those hard numbers, it's really, really tough. Last meeting I was here, I heard numbers all the way from 100,000 to 280,000 to hook up. That's the issue. And I need to see better than that to be able to make a judgment.
Well, you may have come in just a little after that piece, but the heavy lifting is if this gets approved, before any application can be considered, a fee schedule has to be calculated. So no one would be hooking up without that fee schedule that you're talking
That's
about.
one of those things that I don't see for a number. I can't look at it and say, yep, okay, I agree with this.
That would be there'd be a time in the future if this passes for those discussions and for that input.
Right, but to Robert's question, why isn't that going to be enacted when these are being enacted at the same time? So that when you're doing these ordinances, you have a complete plan. You have your fee schedule, you have your ordinance on how to use it and how to allocate it. And it's not even, from what I can see, because again, a person with a residence is not on the list of being able to get on.
Well, when you do rate design, it changes, you'll set it conceptually, but then the numbers will change. The actual amounts will probably change annually or biannually or whatever that schedule is, because you're going to charge a hookup fee. Then you could charge like a customer charge, which is a fixed charge to recover for a sinking fund or whatever, and then you charge a usage thing. And those charges, most likely, it's just like setting electric rates, they most likely would not be the same. So,
They change as the system ages.
well, and they change, and that's all part of the deal.
But I guess another piece that was answered at the last meeting to that question is setting the fee schedule in concert with this created way too many moving parts. You set a fee schedule, a draft fee schedule, and 3 sections are taken out by the lawyer. Then it goes back to recalculating the fee schedule. This set up an ordinance that allows a fee schedule to happen if the ordinance passes, but no applications can happen until that fee schedule happens. So that was the explanation.
Okay, I'm just trying to figure out whether if a fee schedule is not done, whether it can't be agreed upon or whatever, what happens to these?
They sit idle.
Somebody's got to come and apply to trigger them, right? So, somebody's got to come and say, I want to hook up.
To me, all the fee schedule numbers, I think, are there, and I don't know why they can't be at least a sample of some sorts be generated with numbers that are known.
Well, the question
Which are the numbers you're going to use to create your fee schedule?
The question comes, without the ordinance, how do you know what to attach a fee to? I mean, you can't, you should know what the process is and how it's gonna work before you can attach the numbers.
I'm not sure I agree with that.
Dave?
I think just to provide some clarification, you know, the first phase that the ordinance covers doesn't cost anything. You've already paid all of that. So there are no more costs that are going to be incurred by the town. Only the ability to basically recoup costs that have been incurred by the town since 2001. So as far as phase one, in which the ordinance specifically talks about what is recommended as far as the available flows that would be made available to the private entities, those costs have already been incurred and there's no cost to expand the system. The ordinance specifically talks about the fact that any cost for somebody to tie into the system is to be incurred by the applicant and not by the town. So at this point in time, in regards to the town's exposures for anything moving forward, there is zero. There is a future. You know, if the town ever wanted to expand beyond this, that's a whole nother discussion item as far as that's concerned. But as far as what the ordinance identifies with regard to what's available for flows, those costs have already been incurred, and there's no additional cost to be incurred by the town.
Right, but to recoup that, the expenses, some of the expense for the use, there are going to be a buy-in fee and then a reoccurring fee. And if those monies have already been spent, we know exactly how much it is, so we know exactly how much the fee would be to buy in per gallon, basically.
But what you might want to do is, rather than use historic costs to set your hookup fee, you might want to use current, rather than using netbook, you might want to use,
And that's all in Article 9.
yeah, no, it's all in there.
It's laid out in Article 9. I mean, we can go through it. There's section 9.1 for commercial and industrial, preliminary allocation and connection fees to incrementally expand the system.
Right, it says. fees-
Establishment of a fee system, section 9.5. I mean, there is work to do in January that I think would be largely administrative, but it would put those numbers on paper and we'd approve that in January and be ready, you know, for applications. I don't think it's, there are some policy decisions to be made, I think, about what costs want to be recouped, but I don't think it would take more than 2 or 3 meetings and a quick review by general counsel on those numbers. But if this ordinance isn't there, to Fritz's point, or keeps changing and gets amended, it just becomes a chicken and egg discussion. The fee schedule keeps changing, the language keeps changing, it goes back and forth. I feel comfortable doing it this way because no one can apply until there's a fee schedule. So there's no cart before the horse by being set up by approving this ordinance. Dave?
I mean, most ordinances do not include a rate schedule, primarily because that flexibility is set up with the policymakers, the select board. It gives you the flexibility to change them on a monthly, yearly, whatever basis that you want, based on the conditions that change over time with the system. For you to basically put this into the ordinance itself, as far as a specific value, would mean that trying to change that would be extremely painful. And we were advised that as much as we started down that road, that that's not where you want to go.
You'd have to change your ordinance every time you want to change your
Well, I
rate.
wasn't trying to put the fee schedule within the ordinance. I think the fee schedule should be separate. But it would have been nice to at least see kind of an example fee schedule sort of thing. Just have something to look at and adapt to our ordinance, you know, give us a visual of the whole thing.
Peter and Robert?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment. I do think they need to be separate, and I also I don't think that it's that complicated to set up a fee schedule, knowing that the requirement is that it's going to be at the very least neutral to the town. The town would incur no cost. I think truly the heavy lifting here is A, whether you want to adopt these ordinances or not, because that, in effect, you're saying either we feel that it's important for some of this use of the septic be available for some development in the town or not. I hear what Robert's saying about the children's center, and I think, yeah, we would love, they are an asset, but I think there are other assets like the medical center, and there may be others. So I think without having an ordinance in play, then I think it's very sketchy in terms of how the select board representing the town could really make good decisions as objectively as they could if it's on an ad hoc basis. I don't think that works.
I do remember when the Lanes Lane camps wanted to hook on to the town system. We came up with a separate fee schedule for them because they came in so late to the system. And, you know, the numbers were pretty straightforward. The policy values about what they should be paying was pretty straightforward. I think the only sticky thing we went back and forth on a couple times was, is it going to be a lump sum payment, or can they pay it over time like the original people?
Buy-in.
Yeah, and so we gave some flexibility to those seven camps? Nine camps, to pay it over time if needed. And that seemed to roll out pretty smoothly. Robert?
The question is more for Dave. What numbers did you use for the basic cost of installation of the sewer system that's in place and the land acquisition that occurred from the Burns to the town?
I know that, I can recall that the original installation costs and the soft costs at the time were about $140,000.
$142,000 for the installation.
Okay?
Civil's number to put it in was like 252 or 62.
Well, all I was going to say.
So are we going to use the 142 or the 252?
142.
142. And what are we going to use for a land acquisition cost? Because if you're using it that way, you're getting a very good deal at 142. There was reasons why it came in at 142. The land is another very good deal that you can't repeat.
Right.
So what numbers are you really going to use?
Well, if the ordinance gets passed, those would be discussions to come to the select board meeting and have when we set the fee schedule. But
No,
tonight,
I just want to know this now.
well,
I don't
we
need to know in a month.
haven't used anything yet. We're not setting the fee schedule tonight.
I understand that. I'm just asking Dave what numbers we're going to use. For me, to come to grips with it, is very important to know, are we going to pay back the asset that we got? Are we going to make a little on it? How's it going to work?
I mean, those are all good questions. And those are all things that the various committees have reviewed in the past. And the latest idea from the committee was to basically, there must have been like 6 or 7 different cost recovery components that were reviewed and integrated into a recommended costing program that included not only an initial recovery connection fee, but also a quarterly operating cost that would cover, as part of that, the idea of basically the cost of the lane. So rather than trying to lump all of the value of the land, that Burns property that's being used for wastewater up front, that we would basically take the construction costs and collect that as one of the components of the initial connection fee, but at the same time have a quarterly cost that would represent in essence, leasing the Burns property that would be recovered by the town from the users of the system. And again, those are very much policy issues as far as how the town feels is the best way to manage this particular resource in reflection of also the goals set forth in the town plan. So one of the concerns of a previous committee's recommendations was that the initial connection fees were so large that they might keep people from wanting to utilize the system. So the idea from an economic development standpoint was, well, do we kind of finance this for them where we reduce the initial cost but recover it in the quarterly costs? So those are all things that are wonderful discussion points, and we can go a lot of different directions there. And very interested in having those detailed discussions beyond just the committee itself.
But don't you think those detailed discussions should happen before we vote on any ordinance or let the people see? No.
No.
So you'd rather just plain have them vote on it, not knowing
I
what's
mean, right
happening?
now, we need to understand whether or not there's going to be an ordinance in play. If there is, then we'll take all the time necessary to apply the next level of policy issues into that. And that's a process that in every municipality is handled by the select board. It's not part of a public vote on a ordinance. So all we're trying to do is just implement what is the practice in every municipality in Vermont and allow the discussion first to occur as far as the biggest policy issue is sharing a public resource, the wastewater disposal capacity that is currently not being utilized by the town, an important component or an appropriate thing. Question one. If we don't pass question one, we don't have to have any of the other discussions. So that's always been the discussion point and approach from the committee. That was shared and with the town attorney. And I think at this point in time, I think that's kind of what we've heard, what our approaches have been, and what our recommendations to the board are.
The history of this project, or this property that we're using, the voters actually voted on it to buy it for a specific purpose. And that was for municipal septic. It wasn't anything else, period. And I realize that in that case there, I think the voters should have the point of being able to vote on it again if they're going to expand the use of it. And this is where I think that you've got too far ahead of yourselves without having that vote.
Well, I think,
And-
Robert, they will have that vote because
Well, there's a
undoubtedly,
potential for the vote.
absolutely.
And I always told you I'd be very happy to have the vote. I told you that personally when you first asked the question.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the town attorney said, sorry, you can't do that. So,
Tell the town attorneys.
fair enough.
We did try.
You know what Shakespeare said about lawyers? Okay.
So we're running over on the agenda. Is there any new discussion on this?
Clarify one point when it was asked, the period within which the vote is held after a petition is submitted. It's according to the statute, Title 24, Section 1973. There's 44 days in which to submit a petition, and then the vote can be held 60 days after.
Anytime within 60 days.
Right. Yes.
So that works.
Yep.
Okay, people ready for a vote on the motion?
The motion is to have it effective on what date?
January 6th?
6th, okay.
Monday?
I would say not effective. It's adopted as of that date.
Adopted.
Okay, that's good.
All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
410.
This is the notice, which will need to be signed. The dates will need to be changed, but that's the format that will need to be signed and then published.
Okay, we'll do that tonight before, with the warrants. Sounds good.
Great.
Well, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Yep,
No,
thank you
thank
for
you.
discussion. Let's see. John, you're here? John is here for the solar net metering agreements, considering a net metering agreement.
I wanted to start by introducing Sam Carlson from Green Lantern, who has agreed to join us this evening to describe what's going on with the library solar project and to answer any questions you may have about that project and about what the next steps are. I'd just like to first say that in the week since our last meeting and in the few days since I sent out an update, the situation has changed considerably. And what I learned this afternoon is that because of the fire marshal's requirements for a 4-foot space along the ridge line, the project no longer makes economic sense. So Sam is here to talk about that. It means that we won't be asking for you to take a vote on installing solar on the library. If there's time available, we will talk about what the next steps are, because if you recall, a proposal from Green Lantern included both solar on the library roof and solar for other town buildings and facilities. But first I wanted to give Sam the opportunity just to bring you up to speed and talk about how things developed.
And John, are you proposing that we vote on both library and the community net metering for the other town offices?
No, I'm
just the library
proposing
tonight?
that you don't vote on anything.
Oh, all right. Well, that makes my life easy. Thank you.
This is just entertainment time. Sam Carlson, Green Lantern Solar. Thanks for allowing me a chance to meet you all. 2 seconds about Green Lantern Solar. We're Jordan, Vermont's leading provider of solar solutions to towns and schools in the state. We're saving about $1 million a year for towns and schools around the state through solar net metering. We've got about 83 solar projects operating in the state now, about 50 megawatts worth. So we've been around for about 6 years, and really our niche in the solar market in Vermont is schools and towns. We don't do residential. We don't do 20 megawatt monster projects that sell everything out of state. We serve towns and schools. That's really our focus. So we responded to an RFP issued by the town. We submitted our proposal November 18th, and John and Dean have been great to work with, and really want to give a shout out to them. Incredibly responsive in helping us put together a proposal that we thought worked for us and would work for the town. When we submitted that proposal, we thought we could do a solar array that would be around 34 kilowatts. That may not mean anything, it's just sort of a number. But that was putting as many solar panels as we could on the library addition in order to maximize production and help the town enable the Charlotte Library to be a net zero building, right? So we really tried to max out that layout, and that was what went into our proposal to the town on November 18th. Town took a position on November 25th to pursue discussions, and the first step was, let's confirm with the fire department here in Charlotte that we can build this and it's not a problem. And so we sent the layout to the fire department, and they said, well, this is a low building. We can get at it from the ground. There's no need for fire department people to go up on the roof. You're fine as far as the town of Charlotte's going, but don't take my word for it. You have to go through the state fire marshal. So then we went to the state fire marshal, sent in the layout, and they took a while to get back to us. They didn't get back to us till last week. And then they said there are a series of 4-foot walkways on both ridges and access points that are required, and that ended up shrinking the layout that we could get on the solar array to about 26 kilowatts. And believe it or not, going from 34 to 26 significantly changes the economics of the project and makes it such that we can't come up with investor financing to do this in a way so that the town would not have to pay a penny to get a solar array on its roof and generate electricity savings. So it was kind of we were trying to get discounted net metering credits to the town, have someone else finance the whole thing, generate savings for you, and no upfront costs, and that was just, we can't do it at that size array. So if you have other bidders who have submitted proposals that you want to, we are formally withdrawing from that piece of it. I don't want to tell you that we can go forward. We can make it, we can build it, it's fine, but we can't get it financed in its current state. So, as John mentioned, the second component of the RFP issued by the town was for a group net metering agreement that would not be for any solar array in the town of Charlotte. It would be taking net metering credits from a solar array that we're building down in Vernon, a large 500 kilowatt array that's fully permitted, that's going forward, and we would be selling those net metering credits to the town at a discount that would cover all of the town's meters. We would now propose, given the fact that the Charlotte Library solar project doesn't seem to be going forward, that we would then include the Charlotte Library GMP account into that group net metering agreement. John's run some numbers as to what kinds of annual savings that would generate. Would be something we'd consider in the next select board meeting or something. If you guys say, yep, let's get that group net metering agreement under review, and the town council has reviewed our net metering agreement for the Charlotte Library. It's the same language that would be in for the larger group net metering agreement, so that's something that could be, I think, concluded very quickly.
I have a couple of nitpicking questions. One, is the array actually in Vernon or is it in Guilford?
Vernon.
Okay, because I was on your website and it looked like...
Hasn't been built yet. There's one in Guilford.
Oh, there is, that's right. Okay,
Right.
There's a current one in Guilford.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, they're right next to each other, so they're with
The
all...
Vernon would be built in May.
And is the deal is essentially the same? I may have misread this, which is totally possible, but I thought that what I read, that under the community net metering, the recs still go to Green Mountain Power?
Correct.
Okay, I'm just confused, which happens more and more frequently.
Recs go to Green Mountain Power. They're retired here in Vermont. They contribute to
Okay,
Vermont's
that's new, that they're
renewable
retired
energy
here.
standard.
Yeah.
Yep.
So they're not going to, because it's so small, they will not be able to sell them out of state. Is that true?
We could choose to sell them out of state, but we would get a 6 cent per kilowatt hour penalty if we did that,
all right, okay,
which
okay.
we're not going to do.
Okay, got it. Okay.
I think
Yep.
we have some time, maybe we could learn a little more of the nuts and bolts and have some question and answers. One of, I think, the concerns that came up with the long-term maintenance of the physical structure on the roof, seems like that wouldn't be there with this type of arrangement with Vernon.
Correct. The Vernon net metering agreement is just basically a contract between us and the town to sell you net metering credits. You don't own anything related to the array. You have no maintenance, you have no risk, you have no insurance, there's nothing. All it is you agree to buy credits at a 12% discount.
From what we would be paying Green Mountain Power for their electricity.
Right. So it's like you giving me 88 cents and I give you $1.
The advantage of the library was that it would, I've heard the Energy Committee, and I'm very, very impressed with their incredible hard work. There would make a public statement
Yes.
about the town's commitment. So we could have a sign up and saying, visit Vernon.
Yeah. Well, we can still have a monitor, and we can still provide related information.
Show that savings have been made, because it's all on one grid.
Supposedly.
I think one thing I would say about the net metering agreements that would be in the group net metering arrangement for town buildings is the ability of the town to assign the agreement to another party, provided they were equally creditworthy. So even though it's a 20-year agreement, the town has the ability to terminate the agreement provided a replacement is found that is equally creditworthy. So
This would be the net metering agreement in Vernon?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so that's a 20-year agreement.
Right,
That was
it's a 20-year
20
agreement. That's a 500 kilowatt array. We come in, spend $1.5 million, and then it takes a really long time to
Cover.
sell all those net metering credits. So that's why it's a 20-year contract.
And what would the town's total, if we summed up all of the amount that we'd want to be net metering? Do we know how many kilowatts?
the savings to the town, if the library is included, would be about $2,000 a year.
Got it, and 116,000 kilowatts,
So,
117.
You know,
Oh, that's
one of the
KWH,
points that
116, that's
Yeah,
KWH.
kilowatts.
One of the points that came up last week was that the savings were relatively trivial. It depends on the context for that. You know, as a member of the Energy Committee, I'd say that those savings each year are about half of our budget. So if you look at it that way, you're getting really good value from the Energy Committee. And, you know, whether you approve or don't approve our budget every year, you still get those $2,000 savings. So, just saying.
Is there a minimum number of credits that you wish to sell?
Nope. The Vernon array is going to generate about 850,000 net metering credits a year, and the bulk of that has already been sold to Colchester School District. So we're going to go ahead and build this thing. It's sort of how many credits you guys need.
I had another question. Part of this process, exploratory process, also kind of reached out to see if the school district was interested. Is there?
They cannot.
Yeah, they come.
No.
They've hit their net metering cap.
Got it. Well, that's good in some ways.
Well, it's too bad there's
For the
a
district.
cap, but there is a cap, so
There is a
there's
cap.
nothing more available for the
Got
school.
it. So they're not net zero, they just reached their cap.
Right.
Got it.
The school district is allowed a total of 1 megawatt of net metering. CVU is on a 500 kW, and Shelburne Community School doesn't need a whole 500, but they're on a 500 kilowatt array. And in Green Mountain Power's legal determination, that's a 500 kilowatt. So there are certain efforts to limit the amount of net metering that towns and schools can do.
And consolidation complicated that for Charlotte Central School. Other questions while we have
Can I ask
Deirdre?
a related question?
Please.
So our school, Charlotte Central School, is not included in the net metering arrangement. However, to me, the building and the site always looked very solar ready. Would that still be an option? So that would be outside of a net metering arrangement, but,
Because it would be a direct
Right.
offset.
do you happen to know?
So you're suggesting a solar array that would be what we would call behind the meter, that it would just be offsetting electricity kilowatt hour per kilowatt hour?
I suppose,
Yeah.
yeah.
So-
On the building itself.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's an option. It's unlikely that the economics will work because a net metering credit is worth more than a kilowatt hour of electricity because of what are called the RECs, the renewable energy certificates. You get an extra 3 cents per kilowatt hour.
You'd also have to put in battery storage if you used it directly. I mean, it would be, yeah, it could be done, but
It could be done. We would be unlikely to finance it and own it. Because so it's technically possible. I don't see the economics working.
Okay.
It wouldn't be a grid tie system.
Right. It would just offset what's
Yeah.
being used. And it would likely be fairly expensive, and you're only then offsetting at 15 cents a kilowatt hour. When you could be doing better.
Plus the school goes off the grid,
could go off the grid. It could.
but we're not there yet.
So I think I just,
It's not our school.
That's right. There you go.
one point that Sam made that's relevant is that as part of the decision-making on a group net metering agreement for the town, 95% of the language in the net metering agreement for the library has already been reviewed by the town attorney, sent to Green Lantern's attorney, and comments come back. So in terms of legal review, there'd be relatively little required if, the town decided to go ahead with a net metering agreement for town buildings. So. I've also had preliminary discussions with Sam, and I've requested from David Carpenter at Green Lantern a preliminary proposal on the preferred sites analysis, and we've talked about that before. What we're looking at there is something that would identify suitable sites on town-owned land according to the criteria that have been established about what sites are suitable and what are not, and is a potential significant revenue source of the town from a lease agreement and from property tax revenue. So that's down the line, but I think that holds quite a lot of potential for the town. Pending the analysis, if the analysis says that none of the town-owned lands are suitable for solar, then that goes out the window, but it's worth looking at.
One of my concerns with the agreement was the percentage of credits you bought and how that would limit what else you could do. That was my question, why there would be no minimum number of credits, because perhaps if the library or at some time in the future the town still wanted something that would be a demonstration, if you signed an agreement that used 90% of your credits, you wouldn't want to do that. But if you signed an agreement for maybe 50% of your town's power in terms of credits, that would allow you to, should the opportunity arise, do something different as either a demonstration or who knows what might happen 10 years from now.
Well, I think that's the last thing you said is the key. Who knows what will happen 10 years from now?
Right.
So if you want to forego half the savings that you could have in those 10 years for the possibility of something happening in 10 years' time, you could do that. But it seems to make sense to take the value of the net metering credits now, and if a future need arises, then look for a supplier for those additional net metering credits. What you and I talked about a little bit, Fritz, is that the town would not be purchasing all of the net metering credits needed to offset its electricity use. So we talked about doing 90% of them to allow for future efficiency improvements, because you don't want to end up with more credits that you can use because you just don't get the value for them.
And if you wanted to do 85%, we do 85%. If you want to do 80%, we do 80%.
Well, when you're stuck at a percentage and you find some way to make a significant energy reduction, if you're stuck with that amount of electricity that you have to buy, the incentive to put in new technology is not there because you're stuck paying for it.
So you're basically saying like Shelburne's not using their 500, but they can't do anything else. And it stops the district from doing anything else anywhere else in the district because they already got it allocated as
if I have to pay 90% to somebody for what I'm using now, if I find out some way to save 30%, why would I spend the money to do that? Because I'm going to have to pay for the credits anyway. I mean, certain examples come into mind. I put a heat pump in a house that the compressor is, it's basically got a 3-phase converter and it spools up as the need requires, as opposed to up until last year when the compressor was on, it was on, and when it was off, it was off. But by changing the type of electric motor driving the compressor, the efficiency of the thing has gone up significantly because it saves quite a bit. And that's just hey, that popped on the market today. You know something like that's going to come up in the next 10 years, and I'd just be concerned about stifling our incentive to use that stuff when the opportunity comes, when you have to change out the 25-year-old or 20-year-old air conditioner at the fire department. Right. That thing's probably an energy hog. And you know you're going to save a bunch of money because it runs all summer long. if that amount of money has already been committed because you have to buy so many credits, then what's the point in doing it? So I think that would be a good discussion.
Yeah.
Before.
More EV
Yeah.
chargers.
Right, yeah, exactly.
More EV chargers.
Or an electric ambulance.
Right, yes.
I think the point is that we have to be really thoughtful about the allocation that we agree on. And I would go along with you so far as efficiency improvements that we know are likely to take place in the next few years, like what you're talking about for fire and rescue. So we ought to factor those into the allocation. But beyond that, you know, we don't really know what efficiency improvements are going to be. We don't know what additional meters the town is going to establish. We don't know how many EV charging stations there are going to be. So there are a lot of unknowns. So you could use all of that as an excuse to do nothing.
Yeah, and the savings start today.
Or you could just go ahead and
I don't
get
think
the
it would be
12%.
a reason to do nothing. I just think that takes a little broader discussion.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
correct.
okay, that's fair enough.
Fritz, do you know if the town is tending to use more energy over time? You have to look at our energy use for town buildings?
I haven't done any kind of audit. I would hope somebody else would. But I look at things that are, you know, incandescent lights, 20-year-old ceiling fans, 20-year-old air conditioners, and I know that there's energy savings there. It's whether it makes sense, say there's an incentive to replace your air conditioner, but I already got to buy credits. So I think those are things that part of our broader discussion is to kind of get a 30,000-foot view, as Lane would like to say, of what are our target areas, or what do we think at this point we know we can improve. Let's take those out of the factor and see how many credits are left that we need to buy.
For example, we can take out, one of our efficiency, or energy committee members is looking at upgrades within the town hall area, and he knows about that. So we can include that. With those improvements, there'd be some savings in electricity. So I think we all agree that it doesn't need to be 100%. We can build in, but it's important to remember the savings will start from today, and those improvements are possibly going to make in year 2, or 3, or 4. But I agree with you that we should build that in.
I think
If we're looking at this, the savings will start 2 years from now.
Francis makes an excellent point, which is we don't want to build in disincentives for efficiency. And,
everybody agrees that.
yeah.
Because personally, I'm in that spot right now because of the rules of how they're changing for the additional electricity I produce from my place. So
You haven't got an electric truck yet.
it's easier, they don't make them yet. They did for a while, but they quit making them. Got an electric car though. But instead of trying to save money, I'm trying to figure out how to spend that electricity, which is kind of counterproductive.
Yeah.
So I just think it makes more discussion. I don't think that,
Very good point.
For what it's worth, Green Mountain Power Zone projections are that as towns and schools convert their heat systems, their thermal systems to electric, which is much more efficient and less costly with the high efficiency heat pumps, your electricity use is actually going to likely go up. And your gas expenditures or however else you're heating your buildings are going to go down.
Which is true for the library. The town hall is still on oil.
You know,
So-
I'm so old that I remember Golden Medallion homes. You're probably not that old. And what happened when all the schools and homes were heated with electricity, and the really difficulty that created. And at one point in the end of 1970s, every kilowatt hour that was sold in this state in the winter was sold at a loss. So that's just a historic caution. You know, it's just, you know, it's old age, man. What can I say? You know, probably don't remember Golden Medallion homes. No.
But I know that there are certainly buildings, I visited them in Barry, that were on old electric heat, and they were hogs.
They were hogs.
We're talking about progress
Heat pumps.
and high
I know.
efficiency heat pumps and
I hear you.
the kind of
I hear you.
thing that Rich was talking about.
I
So
hear you.
That's GMP's own forecast. Take it for what it's worth. Yeah.
Quick question, hi Sam. it may not really make a difference, maybe it's kind of intangible, but the 83 projects you've done, since when did you start doing them?
2011, we started the very, very beginning, very small. We really kicked in 2015.
And how many of those do you still control?
We control probably 50.
So is there a model as far as selling them, or is that?
We used to sell them, and now we hold them. We have our own fund, we have our own tax equity partner, and we hold them for the full 20 years. We have an O&M agreement, and so right now we're, unless someone comes in and offers us a crazy high price, which they aren't doing, we're holding with an investor as well. Yeah, but so Town of Underhill, we just did a deal with the Town of Underhill. That's a land lease agreement with the town. They sort of asked us the same question: are you going to sell this thing as soon as we build it to some other entity somewhere? So, no, we're holding on to it.
Is Green Lantern doing projects in other states?
We are starting to do projects in New Hampshire and Maine and New York and possibly Virginia. But Vermont's been our bread and butter, but it's time to.
Small state.
Yep. The last thing I would mention is that there was a discussion about doing this preferred site analysis. That's something that we would do for free, basically at risk, with the agreement that if one of these sites comes up that looks very promising, we would like an option to, and would submit an option to lease agreement to you that would specify the lease terms for the land and all that. And if you said, no, that's not enough, then it's not enough. But if the terms of the proposed lease were attractive, then we would then develop that site. But you would get an analysis of 7 possible preferred sites. It's what we do. We know how to go into a site and evaluate whether or not it's a viable site or not. So
well, I can say from just my time on the board, we really appreciate the educational process, and also the kind of the no pressure presentations. It's really helpful for us to make kind of informed decisions. So I think moving forward, it's been great working with the Energy Committee and Green Lantern.
And the Energy Committee's done a great job, and John's been very generous with his time chatting with me, which I appreciate.
You've been generous with yours as well, Liz.
Well.
So we'll get back to you on this group net metering project, and I think based on this discussion, we'll take a look at future efficiency improvements, and we'll come up with something that'll be the basis for a discussion to, if the board decides to go ahead, to figure out what the allocation is, if we want to go to 90 or if we want to go down there 80. So we'll come back to you in due course with that.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for coming out.
thank you.
640 agenda item, a media release for ReArch to use photos of the library edition.
So Margaret was going to be here, but she fell sick tonight, and so it's not going to be here. I believe ReArch has taken some photos, maybe we'll take additional photos, and wants consent to use them.
Tina, you and I had a very brief chat. My only concern on this is that we cannot sign this on behalf of any individuals, any people.
Okay.
And should we try and amend this, or?
Yeah, I think it's completely amendable.
I mean, that would just be a concern if they take photos of people.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have the authority to.
Right. Yeah.
we get a monetary amount for them using it?
Oh, it doesn't look like it here.
Why don't you put it on a line item?
Yeah, I mean, I would think it'd be a one sentence.
Oh, we can maybe do it right now.
Any individual captured within the photo
Yeah.
would need to sign a release as well.
Photos aren't to have people in them.
What's that?
Photos aren't to have individuals in them.
Yeah, unless they're like their employees. Yeah, I wouldn't want to make it restrictive out of our control.
Part of me says in the era of cell phones and photography that.
Not sure they even have to ask for
What
this.
is it? What are we discussing?
Yeah.
History?
Do you want to put in a release of any?
Print digitally as well as name and likenesses, images taken that may include limited to, instead of taken or may include, limited to Charlotte Library, physical plant. I'm just concerned. I mean,
To the structures and property,
Sure.
limited to the structure and property
Yeah, that'll work.
Of Charlotte Library?
Yeah.
of the Charlotte Library.
Sure, that's great.
I mean, I still think I'd put in the other line of getting a release from any person within a photo or within an image.
Do you want to make that as, that may be a requirement, it's not that the town is requiring that, but they may, someone in a photo may.
But we're not authorizing we're not authorizing any images of people.
Without their consent.
Well, no, we're not authorizing it. That means they gotta get consent from somebody else.
I think that we do it, Frank, I think you just nailed it. The structures and property of the Charlotte Library.
Only.
Yep.
Can I ask a question? I don't understand why they're asking you for this permission. I don't understand how they would think that you would have the right to grant this permission. It's a public building. Anybody can take a photo of a public building that wants to, is what the way I understand as a member.
Well, right, but to use that image.
That would be if they were going to pay, somehow or another recoup monetary
Well, that's what I'm thinking, or in their advertising.
But anybody that's in the public is protected by the law. You can take their picture, you just can't benefit from it monetarily without their permission or working, and that's
existing law.
Yeah, I don't see how you have the authority to say anything
Right,
about
but would it be that way if using it in their brochure, we'll say?
That law already exists, is the way I've always understood it. They don't have that right. You don't have, I don't see, I mean, I'm no expert on law, but I don't see how you can grant or take away. I don't see how you end up with a dog in the fight.
I think that's how Street View fuzzes out people's faces. Yeah, they have the picture of
Google's.
Has the picture of the
If they take,
library right now.
I mean, you can take a picture of anybody on the street that you want to, but if you put their picture on a t-shirt and sell it, you're liable.
Put their
Right, but I'm
picture on a
saying,
brochure and use it to sell your product,
Yeah.
then are you liable? I can see, they might have
and
gotten,
I think that's probably what they're thinking, is to be able to put it in a brochure or a pamphlet to say, these are the projects we've done.
And I'm fine with that. I just don't want us to agree to something that we can't we can't, we don't have the authority to agree to.
I think, yeah, I mean, I like to limit it to that
Yeah,
structure,
yeah.
yeah, of the Charlotte Library. It covers
One
that.
thing we may want to do is ask or require permission to use the images, like if they publish an image of the Charlotte Library and we want to use it in
Well, that's what it
town
says here,
report.
ReArch, print online and other marketing materials and publications.
No, I think Dean's point is that we can use the images they take pictures of.
Right, I'm
Is that
not
what
clear,
you're
the
saying?
second paragraph, I'm not clear if it says confers no rights of ownership or royalties, no rights of ownership for the town.
Well, they don't want to pay us for using the photos in their brochures and anything else.
Yeah, is probably what that means, but we
That'd
also
be
want
my-
to
that'd be my
potentially
assumption.
be able to use the photos ourselves without paying them.
I mean,
Depends upon how good the photos
I
are.
do agree that they're probably covered by the law that says that they have to get the permission of any person they take a picture of. So I think probably the main thing is if we want to allow them to use, I mean, I think this is to get them out of paying us for using the images of the structure and the property
Right.
for their brochures or any other advertising.
That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah.
Just a simple thing, so as long as we write down, I think our main thing is if we don't mind them using the images of the structure and the property and not get anything for it,
Fine, I'm
then
fine with
then I'm thinking fine,
Fine by me.
so
Okay.
I would put that, just that line in, that this allows them to take pictures of the structure and property and use those images, if that's what the board would like to do.
Is a motion,
Motion to approve a general photography release with those edits
and approve someone to sign it?
and approve the select board
Vice chair.
chair, the select board chair to sign.
Or vice chair.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any more discussion? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Opposed? We have a final copy written up before I sign it,
Yeah, but those
just with that edit.
Yeah.
Let's see, the Thompson's Point Leaseholders Association.
Yeah, I'm Lee Curry, Vice President PTA. I wasn't sure if Liam is supposed to be here.
I don't think it is.
Okay.
Here.
I wasn't anticipating any kind of speaking role, but I don't know if there's any questions that y'all might have.
I can explain it briefly, and you can fill in if I missed anything.
Okay.
Basically, the select board has previously approved an easement for the water system, which is replacing a lease of the water system. And there is a change proposed since the select board approved it, which is to have the water system serve the caretaker's cottage, which is actually a year-round house. That is usually, but it doesn't necessarily always going to be occupied by the superintendent of the water system, who they sometimes call the caretaker. So that is the purple structure right there. I believe. No, sorry. Oh, sorry, it's right.
Right there, the clubhouse.
No.
Oh, caretakers,
Yeah.
there you go, sorry, yeah, right up there. Move that up a little bit, sorry, yep. One of the results of this, I think, as the site plan was being submitted, indicated that the elevated water storage tank was going to be abandoned, and we requested that it be indicated that it be removed, which I understand is also the zoning board's requirement of the conditional use permit. So I believe the zoning board gave 3 years, and that's, I think, Pete DeGraff, the engineer, felt that was a reasonable amount of time to have it removed.
Yeah.
But just to add belt and suspenders, that could be in the motion of the select board.
Who drafted this?
It's basically the same easement that was approved before, and then it went back and forth between Liam Murphy, their attorney, and our attorney, David Rue. There is a slight timeliness factor in that the lease for the water system expires at the end of the year. So our attorney has reviewed this and has okayed it with edits.
I'll make a motion to approve the wastewater, the water system easement, Town of Charlotte to Thompson's Point Association, Inc., to authorize the chair to sign, to include figure number 4, reference drawing 932-001. Is there a second?
Chair, second.
Any discussion?
If you want to add a condition about the water tower to be removed within 3 years and authorize the chair to sign?
Yes.
I'm not seeing anything that says when they dig up our roads, they have to put them back in the same condition. Am I missing that? Tracing, or should we get unnecessary disturbance?
Paragraph 9, is that? Gosh. Maybe not.
It says construction.
Paragraph 10.
That talks about people, not.
Any damage to
Okay,
property.
yeah, it's the very end of number 10, you're right. Okay.
Yep.
I just, sorry they were late, but page 2, the bottom paragraph, just change the spelling of responsible on line 3. And line 7 of that paragraph. It's just a typo.
What was the word on line 7?
The same, responsible.
Responsible.
Can I ask when this might be available? As a signed, sealed, delivered?
Yeah, I think it'll be available tonight and then recorded tomorrow.
Okay. The folks at the state have been requesting this official, signed copy as a component of our loan that we're getting, and they want, so there's a timeliness factor there as well as our lease expirer, and we'd like to expedite. Thank you.
Hot potato.
Is that?
Hot potato.
Hot potato, that's right. We appreciate y'all.
Yeah.
Can you take care of time?
There's no more discussion. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Do we have a notary here? Or two?
Yes.
Thank you. Where am I signing? By duly authorized agent.
Mary's got to watch you sign it, though.
See that?
Watching.
Was that the responsibly?
Thank you.
She didn't ask whether this is your free action deed. She didn't ask.
Oh, it is. Okay. We're out of time. Don't want to jinx anything.
Let's maybe take a nap.
It's a long one. Is there any public comment? 7 o'clock?
You're ahead of schedule.
We're ahead of schedule.
Do we want to take the 5 minutes to do the minutes that we didn't do?
Sure, let's do that. I came in today and signed the warrants.
So I just wanted to check that you did approve the November 4th, or November 4th? Is that your recollection?
I think we did.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we held,
Notes that we did. There were very little, there were like 2 changes that I saw that I made, but then I was thinking, I wonder if we, I wrote in
Put
my
it
notes
off?
that we had.
Well, I think so.
I think we did. I thought
It was last week's
the
that we-
November 25th that we held off on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, I have to get a copy of the 25th.
November 25th, I guess. Probably have time for that. Why was it? Yeah. Can I see your copy? Make a motion to approve the minutes for November 25th as may be amended. Is there a second?
I'll second.
I saw it.
Is that the alarm for down there?
No. Somebody very important.
All right, all those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 2 abstentions? 2 were absent.
We weren't there. Well, we do approve of you taking care of it all. That was nice of you.
Anytime.
You left me a message too.
Robo message?
You called my house phone.
Guess we can pick that up at the end if needed. 7:05, fiscal year 21, draft budget.
Small correction for revenues.
For revenues?
Revenues, yeah. It's under the ag lease. And I know we talked about what the real contract for the next year was for the park and for Galbraith, and both those numbers changed. So in my notes, I put the right numbers, and in the budget, I left the old numbers, so the ag lease total for next year is $5,227. With a small correction.
Where are you?
The line item is 100-2840.
Thank you.
It's on page 3 of the.
Thank you.
Number?
Yeah.
Also, I think there's 2 changes since the last meeting on expenses. One of the organizations that requested a donation, the Heinsberg Community Center, thank you, has withdrawn their request. That is under donations.
I took them out.
Oh, you did, okay.
Number.
I have to take it out.
What was that number again for the lease? Sorry.
100-2840.
I mean the amount?
Oh, 5227. So that would make your total revenues at 1,438,808, which is page 4.
The other change to expenses, under transfers to other funds, which is section, it's account 100-995. The state has indicated that we likely will get 94%, around 93-94% reimbursement for the repairs to the bridges that were damaged during the October 31st event. So instead of costing $70,000, it will still cost in the range of 70,000, but we'll get reimbursed about 65,000. It's also possible, talking to Fritz, timing-wise, it is not quite clear, but some of that work may be done this year, in which case it wouldn't really hit the budget at all. So I don't know if you want to actually budget both the expense and the revenue, or how you feel it would be best to approach it.
Well, we don't have, we have the engineer's estimate for what it might cost. We don't have any prices yet from contractors actually willing to do the work. There is, at least with some reason to get it done sooner than later, because if you have a particularly high flow in a wet spring, you could
Exacerbate the damage.
It could get a whole lot worse a lot faster.
Mary, do you have input on the accounting side, if we should be budgeting that money if we're...
If you're gonna take it out of the highway capital, I think there's like 50, what is it there now, 50-something odd thousand?
There is, yeah, around.
I mean, there's certainly money in the budget to do the repair in this fiscal year and submit for the 94% reimbursement. If you're going to do it in the next fiscal year, you need to budget the expense and the revenue coming back in. If you would rather have it done looking towards spring, there's no reason that you can't do it. And that's how it would be accounted for, out of that capital reserve fund and coming in as a, what is it, a FEMA grant or?
Yeah, I think it would be mostly FEMA and some state, Vermont, emergency management.
So you just have to decide
Sounds like...
what time period you're looking at and then budget it that way.
Okay. Sounds like this budget cycle is more prudent.
I think so. I think we should, I think once Dean is over some of this paperwork, we're going to try to get an RFP so we can, it's kind of temperature sensitive because you're going to be pouring cementitious material when it's freezing. You can pour it when it's cold, but you can't pour it on really cold stuff. So we can't heat up the ground. It depends on the weather.
Yep.
Weather dependent, the sooner the better.
So that takes out 70, so that leaves 33 in the transfer to highway capital.
Oh, what about Moncton Road? Is that the same? Is that being, when's that work happening?
It's not clear. That was something that...
It was a presentation last meeting. Du Bois and King is going to go back and come up with some other options and then come up with some cost estimates for crushed slate versus the synthetic styrofoam option. From Junior's perspective, it's not a catastrophic issue, but it was definitely something that he needed the engineering study to figure out how to solve. But each year he's kind of been grading and filling, and in the short term, it didn't seem like that was going to be a catastrophe. Adding more stone to do that is definitely out. It'd just be using what's there if it has to happen in the spring, if it sloughs again. That was my understanding.
So
So if we have over $50,000 in that capital account, why aren't we just using it then?
There was further discussion of adding into that reserve fund for possible capital improvements to the sand pile to protect the salt leaching out and coming up with a covering structure down the road. And so between...
Salt shed for 3,000?
Well, it's somewhere between the two.
I think the 3,000 was planning,
That was site,
And there's-
site planning.
There's like, what did we say, 50,000 in there?
Yeah.
No, I mean, 3,000, accounting for 3,000 that you're putting in there is kind of silly. It's,
Yeah.
you know, it's little. If you're looking at putting money aside in these capital reserve funds, it's a, you know, it's 30,000, it's 10,000, it's 50,000, it's 70,000, but don't list every single thing that you might possibly do, and it's 2,000 for this and 1,000 for that, and you'll just make yourself crazy. So if you want 30,000 for Moncton Road, put 30,000 in by all means. There's still money in there for the salt shed.
I think money that goes into a reserve fund has to be used for the purpose that it's going in for. And granted, you know, town garage is within the realm of roads. I think you're covering, you may want to just eliminate the 3,000, but allow whatever, the 30,000 to be used for both Moncton Road and the salt shed and town garage, so you don't receive a complaint that you're not using it for the purpose that it was put into the fund for.
Thoughts?
What's the current balance in the account was 50 something?
It is around 50.
And we're looking at spending 100 out of it? I know the 70's gonna get reimbursed
65 of it.
in theory. I mean, is there the timing there with,
Cash flow wise?
Yeah.
As far as the year-end audit?
and then if we spend everything that's in it and something happens next year, we got 0 in there. Do we want it to be, do we want to spend it all? Or leave some in there?
I think the important piece is the 94% that you're gonna, are you truly gonna get 94% back? Because if you are, then you don't have a cash flow, you don't have a cash flow problem, because all those, well, this special fund is part of the general fund. Like the majority of the special funds lie within the general fund. And if there's a timing issue where you've overspent here because you're waiting for something to come in, it's not a problem.
Okay. That answers that? Because we are going to try to get money from Uncle Sam, so.
It's free.
Yeah.
And that
Comes
very
readily.
well could be 2 different fiscal years anyways, the way the money flows.
Exactly.
So are we comfortable with 33 or reducing it to 30?
Take it at the 30.
Okay, I think if we do bring it down to 30, I like Dean's suggestion of just having that earmarked for both. People comfortable with that? Do you want to leave it
Yes.
at, yeah, 30? Do we want to just go down, look at the allocation to the improvement and repair reserve fund?
Highway capital. It's a highway capital fund.
Look at this.
So what did you just do?
30?
30?
Those all look like pretty conservative numbers.
The senior center replace air conditioning and heat pumps. I mean, heat pumps generally air condition and heat. Do we know if that's a duplicate?
It's not. The climate systems was there, and their current is someone here? Oh, no. Oh, yeah.
What's the question was?
I mean, a heat pump generally does air conditioning also, so I just wondered if there was a duplication in putting in heat pumps and replacing an air conditioner.
It's complementary. So we had climate systems in there, the company,
CSI.
and they recommended there's trouble maintaining temperature in a kitchen when you cook, and in a large room there's a full crowd. So they're recommending the heat pumps to complement the air conditioning that's already in there. So that's what that is. And we have a quote, it's apparently $15,000.
So there are no heat pumps currently, and the air conditioning unit will need to be replaced at some point.
And that's a separate item. The air conditioning unit will have to be replaced ultimately. And that quote is $12,000. That unit, I think, is either up in the attic or outside again.
And the reason it's a $5,000 request is this is looking to happen in 2 or 3 years' time?
Well, look at the whole thing. We have the three things in there. We have the heat pumps, roof replacement, central air conditioning. So the building, I'm not exactly sure, is 15, 16 years old, and we're just trying to plan ahead, as you've done in prior years with capital carryovers, rather than have a big hit one year. So that's what the thought is, these three things for us over 3 years. And if something dies on us in year 2, we'll have the capital reserve fund, we can allocate funds to that. That was the intent. So the request is $39,000 a year for 3 years. The big item in there is the roof. We have a standing seam roof similar to what you've done in the library, and when I last knew you're going to do in the town hall, we're just maintaining the same quality of roofing here. It's more expensive than asphalt, but it's consistent with the other buildings.
Well, if it's
And
just
we've had a request for consider energy conservation when we do the roof. So the roof is a little high, but I think there's some things to add to energy conservation as well.
Mary?
Was that the end of that discussion? Are we just on senior center, or are we going on everything in there?
Fritz, did you have?
No, it's just a placeholder, so if
Yeah.
the engineering would most likely change at
Year 2.
the bid time, yeah, when
As we
it's
start
actually gonna be
researching it.
replaced, so.
Then,
So
yeah.
the 40,000 for recreation,
Transfer?
yeah. Transfer to recreation. You were in the transfer to recreation, transfer funds. Right there. So I don't remember that discussion that it was, what was clear on what that 40,000 was. And there's been lots of discussions of this project and that project.
What's the current balance? 18,907?
Yep. So the framing on the dock needs to be replaced this year. This year, I would say, because it wouldn't make any sense to put the docks in, the old docks in, and then pull the old docks out and put new framing on. So that cost, whatever it is probably going to come out of this year.
We're still on the fence of how necessary that is. From the current conversations, the bolts are stripping, and there are much less expensive options than buying an entire new commercial quality dock system. We
Did they
recently.
get a quote? Did you get a quote?
They got a soft quote, but what we looked at, we already put money in 2 years ago to resurface all of the dock sections. And so we're going to be looking at repairing that for much less than a new dock system.
Okay, so what exactly is the 40,000? Parking lot, probably. There was a discussion of $6,000. They want to expand the parking lot and
Like the skating rink.
that's not in that.
They were talking about a petanque court.
Yep, that's in here as bocce.
That's $1,500. I mean, I'm not thinking of taking it all away, but we've given them 30,000 last year, and initially there was a discussion that we were going to set aside a certain amount for the tennis courts to be totally redone, and that's what that big chunk was, the biggest chunk was to go for.
Yep.
So since it's kind of, the 40,000 isn't a concrete number, maybe we could take 10 off and make it 30 like we have for this year.
I like that recommendation.
And the,
People okay with that?
and then for, you have 50,000 in for conservation, and it's true, we haven't given conservation, the conservation fund, we haven't approved money there for the last couple of years. But their total potential projects for next year are at $460,000 right now. And that's four different projects. Their current balance is around 430,000. So, I mean, likewise for them, maybe we could back off a little and give them something, but give them like, 30,000. If they did every single project, which that's never happened ever, you'd have enough money. Yeah, I mean, the projects move along really slowly, and it feels a little bad to always not fund them, but I don't think we need to fund at 50,000.
Maybe be more consistent and keep it going every year with a little bit instead of waiting 4 or 5 years and then ask for a lot.
Well, when I came on the board, it was level funded, I think, at 50 a year. And then we zero funded it 2 years in a row. And then last year, I think, had a smaller
Last year was nothing.
Last year was also nothing?
18-19 was nothing, 19-20 was nothing, and it was just because of the way that the projects were coming to the finish line, and they just...
I remember at least 2 of those seemed like they were going to be very close, very likely, and the other 2 seemed like there was movement, or at least one, there was a lot of movement. The other had just come on the radar, and then I think the other annual presentation that I've heard is if there's 5,000, then there's no ability to entertain any new projects if they come up. So keeping some fund balance in there, but
But again, there would be some fund balance if all 4 projects weren't done.
Right, if even one of those didn't, that would leave some fund balance in there.
Right.
So what would you want to reduce it to? Right now, there's 426, like Mary said. 50 would bring it up to 476 with 460 projects on the horizon. So if any one of those didn't go through, call it 100,000 off.
I'm just thinking that probably maybe do 30 and then be a little more consistent on the, every year.
Yep, make a commitment to try and fund that at 30 for a few years.
Yeah. Or at least something to accommodate any future projects.
So conservation, reducing, are people comfortable with that? Reducing conservation from 50 to 30? I think the feedback we received in a couple of previous budget cycles is that if we do end up making significant changes to the initial requests, that we contact those departments or committees and let them know so that they can come in early January and talk to us about the budgetary pressures. So that's something we'll have Dean do on any of
these big changes
that we're looking at. Yes.
I would recommend that she come in and brief us again, because from my notes, she said not all 4 projects would happen in the next year and a half.
Right.
Kate Lampton, her notes
Yes.
are September 23rd.
That's my memory
So that
too.
would- okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
I think one just popped up on the radar. It seems.
Yeah, that's kind of what I have to stop. Thank you.
Yep.
I would also level fund fire rescue capital to the same 100 that we gave them last year. Their bond payments for next year will be in the range of 104,000 total. And currently there's about a little under $78,000 in their capital fund, and I think they have maybe about 7,000 more of possible capital equipment requests that they still are purchasing for this year. So
Are you including the total amount for the ambulance when it arrives in May?
Yep.
So you have that at 275?
Was there any, for Patrice and Tom, was there any further discussion about what it looked like for that next large capital purchase?
I talked to the chief about that, and I think we're more than happy to put the tanker off with the understanding it's like a used car. At some point in time, which nobody can predict, your 10-year-old car is going to need more repairs than it's worth.
Right.
More than happy to take it year at a time. Right now, there's, looks like it might run for another 20 years, 10 years, who knows? But there's a point when it either it will become crystal ball, I don't know.
Yep.
But yes, I think that it's agreed that one can be put off.
Okay. So that
to be updated annually.
Annually, and maybe just
keep pushing it off. I mean, the
next budget
last
cycle.
engine 2 that we haven't sold, I noticed that's on the list here that I really wish they would sell it. I don't think it's going to get $10,000. Might be lucky to get 2 out of that one, but.
No, the whole number is at 1,000, 10,000 is the sale of the ambulance.
Ah, okay.
What was the placeholder for bond payments with that 475? So when you remove the 475, the bond payments?
Yeah, it was
raised rather than-
$23,750 for the principal, and the interest is mixed into the 14.
I just wanted to make sure that we weren't being short-sighted, because this present year, the repair expenses for the old ambulance, which is the one we're replacing, that we had delayed and deferred because we needed the new engine 2 instead, that has more than exceeded the budgeted line item for repairs. So I just want to caution you that we could be coming in looking for additional expense items which are equal to the bond payment.
Right, I think that's what we want to keep an eye on as far as throwing good money after bad. Repairing an old vehicle versus paying payments on a new one.
The other thing to keep in mind too, Matt, is that the build cycle on most of these are in excess of 200 days. So it's not something that you can react to too quickly.
Right.
Now, looking at that, as Dean has updated it, now you'll have back-to-back years with 2 large pieces of apparatus being replaced.
Well, maybe you're looking at the tanker and the pumper.
Right.
The pumper's probably pretty predictable. It's a much more important and a more complicated piece of machinery than the tanker.
So are you suggesting we maybe even switch those two?
I wouldn't switch them. I would just push the tanker out another year or 2. Like I said, that might go out another 5 years. Just depends on. It's an older truck. We all know, I mean, how that can go. If 2 years from now the wheels fall off and it costs $100,000 to fix it, it's going to be time's up. If it lasts 10 years, then that's okay. But I think the pumper, the Seagrave, should stay at the 20-year replacement time. Because it has more expensive repairs. They're getting more and more expensive.
Are we putting it at 100,000?
Fritz, just for conversation purposes, what if we moved the 675 to replace the Seagrave into the column where the 475 is right now, and move the 475 out 2 more years from where it is on the screen, not where it was originally intended?
So you've got a gap here.
So move the 675 forward a year,
Yeah.
and move this 475 out.
But it's on a 20-year bond?
Right, but if you listen to what Fritz was saying, one piece of apparatus is more, if you want to use the word delicate.
No, I get that piece, but I'm just not so comfortable planning the replacement of something we're still paying bond payments on. You know, if it's a 20-year bond, then it should be in the 20-year replacement cycle.
I wouldn't move that one up necessarily. I'd leave it where it was and just move the tanker off.
You know, I think we can continue to look annually at the pertinence. The delta is going to be planning in, you know, the bottom line, which is about $30,000 every year. We push that, weighing it against the maintenance on that vehicle. And looking at that year to year, but it's not that much of a change in it's an incremental change to the transfer to the reserve fund.
So with those changes, what would be the recommendation? Would it still be 100, or would you go below that threshold?
I mean, just considering all of the budgetary pressures this year compared to other years, I would think splitting the difference at 95 would take 15,000 off the budgeted allocation. It'd be less than last year's, but for all intents and purposes, about the same.
And as we've expressed before, so long as that reserve fund stays solid, handle all the already committed responsibilities, then, you know, we identify what the needs are.
Right.
You determine the funding.
Right. Are people comfortable with 95?
So you're basically down to a third of what the town originally approved. 99.
1999.
I think when they originally approved it, it was to keep cash to pay for all of these. And with the interest going down so much that.
But I don't.
You know, the interest rate spirals in the next year or two, that would prompt us to look at.
Yeah, and if things fall off the radar, but if I go back to the old town reports, I think the amount of capital, if we added it up, is more than it was back then. So I think, the fund is planning for growth and more expensive capital purchases over that period of time, even though we are reducing the annual appropriation. And that's happening because the funding model has changed.
So I think the original amount was, the very first one was what, 180,000, I believe?
No, it was actually 2.5 cents on the grand list. Was the original intent as voted on at town meeting. But then we changed the funding model to
Then it was
$3 amounts.
right, which was 180, and the mechanism for the reserve fund, as Fritz said, was to purchase outright, which has changed significantly in the last 5 years. But my point is, if you added up the value of the equipment 20 years ago that fire and rescue had purchased through that reserve fund, it'd be much less than the value of the equipment that we're planning for today. So I think the fund is working.
The ground list has also changed, though.
Right.
The ground list has changed to the same relationships.
Yeah.
So Dean, have you changed that to 95, or did I see?
I think I misheard. I thought he said 95, but then I think you said 105 or 95?
No, 95.
95? Okay.
Yeah. Of course, the goal is, I think every year between the presentation to the select board and the presentation at town meeting, is to allow the town to weigh in on the level of service, and then to have us figure out, how to have those mechanisms work to provide the equipment needed to maintain that. And as long as we're hitting that mark, I think, the fund is doing its job.
Yeah, it's not going to be totally correct because the bond payments aren't, the bond payments will change if we're
They
delayed.
still have a positive balance in the.
Yeah. Actually, I didn't change this yet.
Should still be increasing.
It's black.
I guess the last item in the transfer is the $62,000 request for the transfer to the Trails Reserve Fund.
What's that for?
I put in a request to fund $313,200 over a 3-year period to finish 2.5 miles of trail.
Over a 5-year period.
Which would complete to Town Hall from Mount Philo State Park, or no? Would that $2,500 over for
It's over
2.5 miles.
It's over a 5.
Over a 5-year period,
Over
sorry.
a 5-year period. That's where the 62,000 comes from.
Would finish 2.5 miles of trail, which would create connectivity from Town Hall to Mount Philo State Park?
No.
No.
It would create connectivity from Mount Philo to Lake Road. Down to the lake, to Lake.
To the knoll.
So it would go from co-housing into town, and then down Ferry Road, all the way maybe through the Russells, and then to Lake Road.
That's only 2.5 miles? Seems like a lot.
I think it's just where it leads to the train station.
Yes, sorry, to the train station.
Okay.
Because yours is, yes, from, so two,
Co-housing.
yes, 2.5 miles, you were right, yeah, 2 miles, 2.5, yes.
And this number is from,
It was from Junior's estimate that we had gotten for how much it would cost to do those particular sections from Ferry Road to the train station and from co-housing to town. The one thing I would say is that, you know, as you all know, in the past, we have received grant funding for a lot of the trail. Last summer, we walked the trail from co-housing to town with V-Trans, the person who does the V-Trans grants, and also the person who does the Vermont Forest Park and Rec. And we've gotten funding from both of them in the past. After they walked from co-housing to town, they said that that section in particular did not fit their criteria, and they would not consider giving grants for at least that 2-mile section. I think that from Ferry Road, from town to the train station, I think we could certainly go and try to get funding for that, grant funding. I think there's no reason we couldn't, and should we get that, then this might be more of a 4-year request than a 5-year request if we could get the funding. So we certainly would go for that if that fit their criteria.
How much is in the fund right now?
There's about 67,000, which we're hoping to come to you and request to go out for bids for the State Park Road, to complete State Park Road.
How far is that distance of trail?
That's a half mile. State Park Road from Mount Philo to Melissa and Trevor Mack is about a half mile. So with what's already been done, we're hoping that we can go out and get some bids and see if that might, if we might be able to get it for them. But we're hoping that that would work. So we're really, this is not funding for State Park Road, what we're requesting for next year.
Mary?
How many easements would you need to, how does that work? For the 2.5 miles of trails, where are you in, I mean, you must be getting easements from going across people's private lands.
Right. We, if we chose if we were able to do the preferred section from co-housing into town, we would be looking at 4 easements that we would need to get.
So have those people been contacted, or do you have any sense of?
One we couldn't get a hold of because they don't live here anymore, and their house is on the market, and so they're not around. But there are 2 that seem pretty amenable out of those 4. One who has expressed that they are not that interested, but
So then how are we paying for the easements? Unless we have to pay for them.
Actually, one person was willing to do it as a, just to give the easement, not for any compensation at all. So, and we're thinking that potentially 2 of them, and maybe even 3 of them would consider giving an easement. The other option, if we didn't get easements, would be to go along Greenbush Road, as we're doing on State Park Road in the right-of-way that we already have. So when we did the scoping study, the first option was to go through the woods at the very back of those 4 easements over to Route Max. But if that's not a possibility, that we have the easement out to Greenbush Road on co-housing, and that we could go to Greenbush Road until we get to the Burns property. So that would be the option B, which would require no easements, actually.
It just seems like those kinds of things should be in place first.
Well,
and build up the money, unfortunately, slower, because I mean, if you don't have where your trail is going to go, you don't have it solidified with this is where it's going to be, and these are the people that we're going to cross, and this one's going to give it for free, and this one is not, but this is where it's going to go. If you don't have that piece, and you're asking the town to set aside this amount of money each year.
So right, but the first section that, as when I presented to the select board, the first section that we are looking at doing is Ferry Road, and that would be either on the road or next to the road. I mean, next to the road somehow, and we would, if we got the funding, then we would go ahead and figure out exactly how that would take place. And then do that, but we would not need easements on Ferry Road. But that would give us time, that's why we talked about Ferry Road first. So that would give us maybe the next 3 years to look at those easements and figure out, you're right, figure out how are we gonna get them and how are they gonna be done.
We have had communication with them, and part of the thinking is with more funding, we'll actually be able to hopefully buy some easements. But it increases our options of finalizing that. In the meantime, we're planning on just making a footpath and then building on the Mac Trail. We have a lot of area that we already have the easement for that we can build on the Mac Trail to connect to the loop that's in the town forest that's already done. So I mean, we're planning on basically coming from co-housing and then the loop behind the town hall, and then probably a footpath in between as we get the easements from those property owners. There's a lot, we have a lot of mileage on easements that we already have. I mean, even just the Mac Trail is, that's a huge easement.
I've been focused in general on the board of coming up with, I think, fair and predictable processes for planning. When I first came on the board, I was a liaison on the Trails Committee. There had been a sharp learning curve on the specs of the quality of the trail from the first section at co-housing. And you kind of made a commitment to have a better designed trail system. And then that second rollout went really well. Got the best trail builder in the state. It was incrementally more, maybe 50% more. And then, the town has hit some roadblocks. The funding model that was working with getting grants dried up. The sections of trail definitely got more difficult as far as the construction specs for them, especially the State Park Road one and going through a wetlands. And so that has been a longer process for that section of trail. But I think with the latest kind of iteration of building out that trail through a volunteer effort with reduced specs has kind of cautioned me to think about having the Trails Committee come up with a more standardized approach to the trail planning and build-out process. And the request that came in, it's hard to see that laid out of what that $300,000, which is kind of the biggest budget I've ever seen for trail funding, with the least amount of homework and specs and quotes to kind of support that funding. So, you know, it's kind of at a nexus in this budget cycle where we have like a month before we have to finalize, you know, what amount of money to put away. You know, I think the operating funds and maintaining the trail systems we have is there. There's a significant amount of money in the reserve fund right now for current projects. But in looking at funding out 5 years, it just seems like a lot to go from a $5,000 funding model to a $60,000 funding model with the information that we have as far as the build-out schedule.
I'm apprehensive about such a large chunk of funding without some direct public discussion. I don't know if maybe this would become a warned article that would invite discussion on just this, but that would give us direction from the taxpayers to whether they, I mean, it went, like you said, from $5,000-$10,000 with grants to now, you know, it'll end up being $500,000 by the time it's done. That's a significant change. And I haven't seen or heard from the town as a whole if that's the direction they want to go. I think one way to encourage that discussion would be to make this not a budget item, but a warrant item that would have the same dollar figure, but it would invite separate discussion as to whether or not we want to proceed in this direction with that much worth of trails.
Well, yeah, and you got this big number with, as Mary stated, there's some easements that aren't available yet. And you have option A and option B, and it's a blanket price per foot for this part of the trail. I mean, I'd like to see a little more specifics, you know, how much does the Ferry Road section cost? How much does it cost to go from the village past the Burns property? You know, maybe make it into a little more understandable, shorter sections so that it can be understood by the, you know, the people. And I agree having the people vote on it.
I think it was 4 years ago or 3 years ago, we did an article. There was a significant ask. It was for $40,000, and it passed. So, you know, I think that was an effective way of funding, you know, of putting out to the town and getting that buy-in from a larger group of people than the 5 select board members.
And I think the recent study we did on Front Porch Forum, that survey, it certainly showed a lot of support. So I think it would be good for the town to weigh in and say how they feel about the trails and if they want it. I mean, we think there's support, but it's always good to hear. I think the biggest concern that I always have with that is that at town meeting, you have 150, 200 people out of the 1,743 households we have in town, and I think it makes it hard for 2 working people to make it to town meeting, and so that is always a concern that an article would go down because 150 to 200 people decided rather than the entire town to weigh in on those.
Well, that may be true, but I mean, they're going to find some people that are going to vote for the budget and not even really look at that one particular number.
So if I,
They're gonna look at the whole budget as a whole
if I
and
remember,
just see if it goes up or down.
if I remember correctly, if it's an article, that would be voted on town meeting day?
No.
It would wait
Voted
until
in
the
April.
next, it would be voted on in April.
When 200 people vote by Australian ballot for the town budget and all the money articles.
Say that again?
So they can't vote an article down from that town meeting?
Well, they can, they can discuss it off
And
the
then it
floor.
would be subsequently.
And, you know, they can amend it up, down, zero it out, whatever.
Is that what we did with the
And then whatever
40,000? Or it went
that
right
vote is,
to Australian
that's what's
ballot?
voted on in April by paper
So
ballot.
it might not make it to that
Because it
Australian ballot.
needed to be.
Could be zero at the time.
Yeah.
Last year.
Well, it is because it changed the tax rate, right?
It's just a regular article voted from the floor, like the budget. It's,
Right, but any budget item off the floor has to go to a vote in April.
Oh,
right,
through the charter.
right,
Right.
which is disappearing after this year.
This is the last year. Possible. Okay, so what are the leaderships from the Trails Committee thought about doing a separate article at town meeting that would then get approved in April?
So it could get voted up or down at town meeting, is that my understanding then?
Yep.
That the amount could be changed, the article, or if we went in at 62,000 at town meeting, then that number would be discussed or not?
I think it can be, which would be the same as the general fund.
Yes, it's
Right.
discussed, and you
Yeah.
can make an amendment, just like you can to the budget and
And
say,
then,
you
and
Right.
know,
then it'll be
whatever.
voted on at town meeting to forward that dollar amount to the April vote.
Okay. So then we would need to just have the town, we would really want to speak at the town meeting then to say, let's let it go to the town as a whole to be voted on in April.
Correct.
But that 62,000 is misleading. That's a 5-year reserve. So if you're gonna do that, multiply it by your 5,
313,
that's
200.
313,000. Do you wanna do that? Or do you wanna leave it as a,
Does anybody do it that way, or is it?
I think you could explain it, that that's what's going to happen, but what you're actually going to put in is you want the 62.
You vote year to year on that.
Right.
On the amount, yeah.
Right. And I would prefer to do that too, in case we
62
get grant, right,
year.
in case we get grant funding, because you don't want to say, yeah, we want all 5 years, but then we get grant funding. We don't need all of that, so.
And you could change that number if you want before we drop the articles. If you think this year it'd be, better to have it be, not equal amounts in 5 years. But each year that you have something significant, like what the Conservation Commission does, is they say, hey, we have these 3 projects. This is what the likelihood of each one maturing in this budget cycle would be. This is what's in the account. Can we build it up X amount this year to reasonably cover the expectation of construction costs?
wouldn't it be better to define a project? I mean, like you said, Ferry Road to the rail station, $80,000. Define a project. The easy, low-hanging fruit that you're gonna, not an easement.
So the thing is, we do have scoping, like the scoping has already been done on all this. We actually have a lot of details already done. Until you get in there in the nitty-gritty, actually for us to come up with exactly how much it's gonna cost is really difficult. Yeah. So we're like doing the best we can with the estimates, but until you go out to bid, like and the whole volunteer effort, which I'm really glad that happened, but the Trails was not involved in that. We really weren't involved in that effort. So we are getting better at this. That was not a part of the Trails Committee. And the funding has dried up, and we want to continue with this. We're gonna need some funding. And, and that's, I guess, we need to determine what is the right amount, so that it's not a huge amount one year, and how much we get feedback that yes, the town wants this. And we don't want to just keep spinning our wheels and not making forward progress. So that is why we're here.
And if we do get the approval that the town wants it, then we could do more of that planning and say, okay, let's really look at Ferry Road. Let's get some engineers to figure out exactly what it would take and then come back and really bring that. But you can't really pay for that if you don't know you're even going to get the funding. It's sort of a chicken and egg kind of thing. It's tough.
I mean, the other thing we've seen, that a half-mile trail can cost $60,000 or it can cost $600,000. So we're at the low end of that per half mile at the 60. Okay, so that's what we're really trying to do here, is have the money there so we can move forward. It's hard to ask people for easements when you have no money and you really don't have the ability to build anything. It's kind of like how the conservation fund was for many years. You know, money went into that fund and it gave them the ability to go out and to take on projects. So if we don't know, we're spending a lot of time and energy as volunteers, and if we go out and do that and we spend hundreds of hours doing this and there's no money, I'd rather find out there's no money and not do it. You know, if that's the case.
Right.
So we need to know that the town wants to do this. We're asking for just the minimum funding so that we can pay for things as we go forward. And it's easily, if you look at what needs to be done to go from what we have to go to the lake, 300,000 we know is the low end of what that's going to be. If we can do it for that, that's great, but it's not like we're asking for more than what's going to be needed.
Right, but you're asking for so much a year where you may get grants or anything else or volunteer help. I mean, all that would fit into it. So, I mean, your 300,000 may not be 300,000 by the end of the project. So I'm just kind of.
We could get a $50,000 grant one year. So then we would only be asking for 22,000, you know what I mean? 22,000 that year, sorry, not even that, 12,000 that year. We also continue to do fundraising. So we will, you know, that money will go into that reserve fund as well. So we're not stopping the other things we're doing, but as John said, it's really the minimal amount we need to move forward and know that the town is supporting this and that we can move forward and get engineering and
That there's a reason to do it.
right,
Yeah.
250 permits, wetlands permits, and all the other things that need to happen before it's built.
So I have just two observations. One being, I have rarely seen a construction project come in at the low end of any estimate. So from a planning perspective, you know, this 313,000 realistically seems way low. But so that's out there. But then that second piece where, you know, whatever the article requests that you want to do, the amount might be low, it might not be. Is at what rate do you think the town supports this? I don't think it's black and white. Yes, the town supports trails. No, the town doesn't support trails. It's does the town support trails at a rate of $30,000 a year, $60,000 a year, $100,000 a year? And that's a qualitative judgment that I think strategically the Trails Committee, I could spend some time thinking about in the next month before we finalize the articles for town meeting of what the annual ask plan might be. Right, is 62 the right number for this year?
You know, we're going to compare it to senior center funding. There's people who use that facility a lot, and there's some people who never use it. We're going to compare it to all the different, you know, trails has been very low. And if people want it, they need to start funding it.
Right. And it is a finite, we're not talking about 62,000 forever. We're talking about a 5-year process, you know, and then that's, you know, then it's done.
Well, to the train station and then to the beach.
Right.
But, okay. So will the Trails Committee have a meeting between now and the end of January, mid-January?
Yeah, when do we have our meeting? 14th, I think. Is it the 14th? It is the 14th. When is the meeting?
Next regular meeting is January 13th.
13th.
Oh,
And we want things
Yeah.
relatively finalized,
We'll
but
try to move it up.
my guess is we'll have a meeting on the 20th. It's just as complex as this year's budget is turning out to be.
We'll try
so
to
do we
move it
have
up.
to move it up, or is the 14th?
If you can, that would be helpful. There's a lot of moving parts this year. If you can't,
Prepare to come back on the 13th.
Exactly.
that would be good. And we could look at, editing the article language and coming up with something that, I think we could
Present?
put in the town report.
Yeah.
So you're gonna zero that?
Yep.
I mean, what's been done
Or
in the
level
past
fund it to
is-
5,000?
Let's at least
You
level
can,
fund that.
so,
Zero.
on this,
What?
in the spreadsheet,
Because you're.
the way you've done it in the
it's
past
like
is
instead
have
of
additional
asking for five,
articles
you're asking for 62.
below the line, so you can see what the tax rate is without the articles, and then the tax rate with the articles.
Yes, we did that, yep.
So,
That's it, right. Not knowing if they get approved or not.
Right.
That
So put
allows
the-
us to
so put
see.
5,000 into their normal funding and then.
okay,
Well, Mary's recommendation was to zero fund it and have it all be through article or
Right.
5,000
He was talking
level
about
fund.
5,000 level fund plus.
It all goes to the
article.
same place.
Right, but 5,000 they
Say-
get anyways in the budget if it passed, and then the article would add
On
the
top of
extra.
that. So I guess if we're gonna level fund the 5,000, I would reduce your calculation by 5,000 of your 5-year total. So it'd be 25,000 off that 313 and then divide that equally, so that the town is committing X amount. It's not kind of double funding,
Right.
Right.
But yeah, as far as the 5,000, I don't see any change in that level of support in the general fund budget from any previous year.
Sounds good.
Where does that leave us?
I kind of, that, my thought because the budget is much more this year, my thought is that we need to make sure that we pay to keep stuff running and keep what we have in good repair. And if we're gonna go above that, I want to hear that the taxpayers want to do it. So I think this follows at least my thought process as to how we should look at the budget. We don't want to let stuff go down the toilet, but if we're going to start a new project, somebody tell me that's what we want to start.
Mary, next?
Under planning and zoning, the zoning administrator, and maybe this is just me that didn't, whatever. I know there was a discussion about changing the zoning administrator's pay, whatever. So anyhow, I didn't think that you guys agreed to that change.
What page? Page 5?
Page 5. If you look on the, if you take Daniel's pay rate right now and then you look at what it would be for next year, you come up with a total of $40,082, not $42,099. So I think that was a request that was made to increase his salary for some reason, but I didn't think that you guys voted on that and made that change because you would have had to do the silly pay grid thing.
Yeah, we didn't do any pay grade.
We haven't.
I'm sorry.
But this is a budget, assuming that we may very well do that, so.
Right, this is the budget for next year, and you had indicated that you would be going through
If it
some
doesn't work,
evaluation of
yeah.
the job descriptions which have already been changed.
This is not the confirmation either way that we will be doing that. This is the putting the money in there in case we
Right.
decide to do it. It's there and not out of whack.
So if it doesn't have, if that adjustment isn't made, it'll be a $2,000
Surplus,
surplus
yeah.
that gets returned.
So I think for budget purposes, it's appropriate. For the actual decision, that's going to happen in the future.
Peter?
Just before we move off of planning and zoning, I would like to request an allocation of $4,000, which would go towards the traffic study that we show on Village. So this was something that we submitted a letter to the select board, and we talked about it at a meeting maybe 5 months ago.
It's in there.
Pardon?
It's in there.
It's in
I
here.
think it is in there.
Total 4,000.
Oh, okay. But what I wasn't sure of was whether, in being involved with this, is whether that was going to be done before the start of 2021.
No,
Or have
because
they
it would be
committed
in the, what they call the UPWP for regional planning, the unified planning document that regional planning does is an FY21 budget for them as well. So we would have to apply for that, but it couldn't actually, they wouldn't do the work, they wouldn't fund the work until FY21.
Until after July 1.
Right.
And there was also, back at that meeting, I recall, there was some discussion about whether that could be extended. I think the select board was thinking whether or not it could extend all the way across town because of the concerns on the West Village side. So I don't know if you had come to any decision about that or whether.
Extending it to the ferry?
Well, there had been discussion of both, and we brought that to regional planning, and they said they're kind of separate animals. Actually, back in the spring, I think, they said possibly combine them, but this last time they said do what they call a safety audit on Ferry Road, which doesn't require any town money. And then apply for East Charlotte as a separate study.
But it's not going to start until 21?
FY21, July 2020.
Okay, so then,
I had some discussions, having not been to the East Charlotte planning meetings, about traffic calming and how many times do we do a traffic calming study, and you have only so many tools you can use for traffic calming. And for us to spend $4,000 and then another $20,000 of county money to say, yes, you can stripe the roads, you can do this, it's like, how much of this do we already know? And I would like to see a little more discussion about that, and maybe perhaps looking at previous reports. And our town planner, Daryl, has a bent towards transportation anyway, and I just hate, I guess he would say I'm a study skeptic. I hate to keep studying the same thing and saying, yes, we can put stripes, yes, we can do this, we can put.
Can we do stripes anyways?
Well, that was another comment that I spent quite a while talking to Daryl about, is like, just take the $4,000, put the 25-mile-an-hour signs up. It's not a legal posting for 5 years, but at least it's done. Many people would pay attention to them. Somebody might contest the ticket if the police even gave them one, knowing that it's not officially posted for 5 years. But study stuff and put lines down to try to get people to slow down, so then we can do a study and say, well, they didn't really slow down as much as we thought, so now our median is at 40 and we can only go down to 30. It might not be where you want anyway, so pick the end goal. Do like on Greenbush Road, 25 to here to 35 to 40, and just put the signs in, and then in 5 years, it's a done deal.
I like it.
And we've spent, the amount of money we've spent is just on the signs, and we know the net result will be where we want it to be. This way, we're doing a calming study and gonna do some stuff, And we may get to where we want to be, we may not. We may have to, after spending all the money on the study and spending money on the work, then finding out we still can't get to the 25 mile an hour we want. My thought was just do it.
My response would be, I'm not a traffic calming expert, I don't know. So I would definitely defer, at this point, I would defer to experts that do it. If there's local experts that can do it for a lot less money, and we think it's going to have some effect. I mean, I would say you could make the same argument and say we could spend $4,000 and put in some lines that may do nothing. I don't know, I'm not a traffic expert.
Well, part of my thought was, we did that out here. I mean, we had a Du Bois King report for the sidewalks and the traffic calming and the striping we did down on the other side of the intersection and what the options were for calming traffic here. We have a report for that, and I'm just wondering, are we duplicating the work if we're going to do it a mile or two east and come up with the same options?
So what was the result of the report? What happened?
We put in fog lines. We put in fog lines in not the immediate year after, maybe the second year after. Increased the budgets for patrol. So there were more patrol hours. We were getting probably doubled the patrol hours. Even though the contract was there, we weren't getting all those hours. So we changed the patrol provider. I think we'd have to do some somewhat basic analytics to see, is it safer in the last 3 years than it was in the last 6? Are there fewer accidents? Are they less serious accidents?
You'd have to quantify it somehow.
Quantify.
I don't know if the characteristics are the same, the West Village to the East Village. I think from all that I heard, all that we heard through folks that live over there, is that coming south on Spear, it's like a straight shot down that hill. And also it's the same coming from the west on the Shaw-Heinsberg Road. You're coming down that hill, there's no, like you don't get a sense that, oh, I'm entering a village. It's just like, oh, this is a straightaway. So, I mean, that's what we heard.
We will find that harmony in what will make people slow down.
It's definitely not the same.
Well, I think that's right, is how do you do it, and you want to hire.
Because this was already 25 miles an hour, and the part of that study was to try to get people to follow that. And I think it's common knowledge that the best way is to have the guy handing out tickets. This whole process that we're going to study and spend a bunch of money on may not get us to the 25 mile an hour speed limit that we want. We may do the study and follow the rules about only going at 80% of the mean or whatever the formula is, and that may get us to 35 at the center of what we plan to be East Charlotte, when we want it to be 25, because you want, I'm assuming, pedestrians and all that other stuff. So to spend the money, maybe get there, spend a lot less, and know you're going to be there in 5 years.
Well, I guess that's my question, is how do you know you're going to be there in 5 years?
If you post it, you can post, the town can post whatever speed limit they want. It's not a legitimate in terms of handing out tickets.
It's a backdoor ordinance.
Until
statute.
5 years. You have to wait 5 years.
I understand that. I'm just, I guess my question is, you can't necessarily guarantee that that will fix it. Posting signs, right? I don't know, again, I'm not a traffic.
You may end up with the same.
Enforceable, but it doesn't guarantee that it will fix
Yeah,
it.
that people are going to.
It makes a ticket stick after 5 years.
But the enforcement option is there. I mean, the same things could still apply, just like we had here. How do you slow people down? You put the fog lines, you stripe some crosswalks, you put up the pedestrian signs. Those things haven't changed, and I just would like to see.
When it becomes enforceable, is that something that we can then put in our ordinance? or that has to be put in our ordinance after the 5 years?
I think you would do that, you would put it in the ordinance, and then it just wouldn't, if it was challenged, it wouldn't be enforceable.
For 5 years,
Yep.
Okay.
unless it was a petition. Patrice?
Yes, there's a successful traffic calming method that is used in other towns and cities in Chittenden County that definitely slows traffic. And they're speed humps, not speed bumps. You don't have to remove them, you plow right over them. They're used in highly concentrated residential areas. And they work in other communities, so I don't know why we just don't do that.
When a speed hump is put on a road that has a 25 or 30 mile an hour speed limit, as a town, it's not responsible to put a speed hump on a road that has a 50 mile an hour speed limit. You would be creating a hazard to anybody that's following the legal speed limit and putting a bump in the way.
There's speed limit signs along that stretch of Greenbush Road that stagger it down as you get closer to the village.
I think
And they've been there for a number of years already.
the current planning is $4,000 earmarked for eShot. I think the global town safety discussion is important, but we don't have time for it in this budget discussion. But this kind of all started from this $4,000 allocation for a study versus doing something else with it.
Fritz has already referenced the study because I was on that sidewalk committee. And I think if you pull that out, one of the methods that they talked about was installing speed humps.
Yeah, there were dozens of traffic calming methods.
And that was my point, is I don't want to pay to do that again. We have a report. Let's pull it out of the drawer and read it anyway before. Well, I mean, we can, again, leave the 4,000 as a placeholder. If we don't spend it, we don't spend it. But that's a different discussion that we don't need to have at budget.
I have a process question.
Please.
I'm wondering if there's going to be a discussion about the energy committee budget, because we're also simultaneously hosting the climate caucus. There are 100 people over in the senior center, and we'd really like to get back before it finishes up.
Pick it up right now?
we've been hearing
5 minutes?
I mean, if we're good to go on our budget, great, but we're here to lay down on the tracks if there are any questions.
Are there for energy?
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Mary's got a question.
Mary?
I do. So part of the budget has fire and rescue air sealing for $2,000 with a $1,000 rebate. Senior center roof weatherization at $1,500. Town hall LED upgrade, $2,000. Those three things feel like those should be in, well, the $2,000 for the town hall lighting is, we just put $2,000 into the improvement and repair to set aside for lighting. So this would be like double dipping. Those three things feel like they should be within those departments' budgets. I mean, the senior center, if they do roof weatherization,
the thing is, the priority is for us to do energy efficiency, and we didn't actually earmark it and put it in our budget. I don't think it would be done. Because
what do you mean by being done? Because we're going to buy our own lights.
Oh, in your case, then that's great. Then in that case, maybe it doesn't need to be on our budget. But we know with something like, let's take the fire station, we're dealing with, fire engines, life and death situations. Energy efficiency is not top of their minds. So that's why we're making.
Who's doing the job? Who is doing the air sealing?
We are the ones that actually commissioned to have an environmental audit done, and that was the low-hanging fruit. So we have the actual estimate for that. So we're the ones that have managed that process. That's why it's in our budget. But if there's something that can come out of a different budget, like the LED lights, then yes, that would be great. But when we're managing and coordinating the contractors that work on energy efficiency, starting with the audit, and then it makes sense for us to.
So the audit is $2,000?
We did that last year. I'm talking about our track record. But for some of those other items, like the LED lights, then that could come out of a different budget.
Well, the $2,000 was done last year. Why is it in the budget for this year?
If you can guarantee and it's earmarked and itemized in a different budget, fine. But if it's not, I think it really needs to stay in our budget.
That's the air sealing project.
The LED ones I'm referring to.
Oh.
You just mentioned the town hall.
Historically, that's how we do our work. We have a line item for the library, say, to do work that they wouldn't do themselves. So we do the energy audit, or we do, we send out the RFP to get the actual work done. We don't do the work ourselves. We send out an RFP for that.
Well, if it's 6 in one, half dozen the other, we could take it out of the
We've already budgeted for it.
town hall maintenance.
Town hall has already budgeted.
In the town hall,
Improvements.
Yep.
I'm not 100% sure on this. Doug, a member of our committee who's at the meeting at the senior center right now, I know he's an expert on LED lighting, and he did the study, and Dean, maybe somebody know? I have a recollection, I'm not 100% sure on this, but that his proposal was to split the cost. And so if it's showing up twice, that may be
It
the
says
explanation.
total investment 4,000, half to be paid by the Shaw Energy Committee. And so the other half is coming out of the town hall maintenance.
Again, I'd want to have him confirm, but if it's showing up twice, that might be the explanation.
That's what we put in our budget, was that half would be paid by us and half
Should
would be.
this,
Right,
should
exactly.
this be done out of the budget for the particular building?
Yes.
Yeah, according to our auditor, they want us to report as accurate as we can what's done and where it's done
So
to.
if there's a test that needs to be done at the library, it should come out of some library budget item?
I would think so. I mean, the
Historically,
testing,
we haven't done this because
Right.
our job has been prioritizing energy efficiency.
And-
They haven't had the expertise, so they're buying books, they're building them. So in other words, if we don't work on these projects, they don't happen. That's why we've done this in the past.
We've
The
also
process has
had
worked.
a flawless auditor's report, so I think that the way that the Energy Committee has been doing it is completely fine. There's been no comment that the way that you've been doing the studies should be allocated differently from an accounting perspective.
the studies as opposed to the
The
actual
actual
work.
work. But maybe that town hall, the other $2,000 should be added to the town hall maintenance budget. And we just commit to doing that. And having the Energy Committee hold the select board's feet to the fire of making that change for $700 a year in savings.
That's fine, and we can make sure it doesn't,
We can agree to that.
yeah, we can
So,
definitely agree to that.
can we watch you put the 2,000 in?
Yes, please.
Yeah, exactly. We want
Where-
to see the
where's-
2,000.
So we're putting that in,
Where's that
Let's do
gonna
that.
go?
there we go.
Okay, great. And now you take 2 out of ours.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think the 7 includes, I mean, you look at years past, the 7,300, 7,800, I'm not certain the
You added
7,000.
11,000 now.
No, you don't.
Wait, it's a $4,000, you can't take the 2,000 one place and say you're gonna pay for it, if we don't see it under town maintenance.
He already added
Did you add that? It was-
2,000.
Oh, so that's.
Well,
Oh,
splitting
sorry,
it
I thought
also
it was
doesn't
okay,
follow
thank
our
you.
purchasing policy
The
very
number's a long
well
way
either.
away.
You need a bid for anything over $1,000.
Yeah, which I'm
So-
sure we'll do when it comes time for.
Yeah, so this way it keeps
And
the
we would-
budget,
And we would take it out of our maintenance budget
yeah.
for the town hall.
So that one goes down by 2,000.
So there was a match, I think the Energy Committee was putting 2,000 in their budget with the hopes that the Select Board would put 2,000 in the town hall budget.
Right.
So if you're taking 2,000 out of the Energy Committee budget, then,
Mary said we budgeted 2,000 in this year for the LED? Is that what you're saying?
You budgeted you budgeted $2,000 for lighting in the improvement and repair
Right.
fund for next year.
But it's $4,000 cost, so,
So we just moved another 2 in.
okay. Right. It's hard to tell with Dean scrolling up and down, but Dean, you have that?
right, okay,
And this
I'll
is a
check.
guess anyway.
Yeah. Are there,
It's right pocket, left pocket, you just moved the same amount from one to another.
Took the Energy Committee down to 5720,
Okay.
and
And it went into maintenance.
it went to town hall maintenance, 9,000.
Reserve fund budget.
Mary reminded me that I I think we put some money in improvement and repair reserve fund. That's a separate.
Does anyone have any other substantial changes to the Energy Committee's budget so we can?
Good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you hanging out. 8:35.
I'm glad they allowed us to.
Actually, sorry. Now that I'm looking at the allocation to the improvement and repair reserve fund, the 2,000 was for the bollards outside.
Oh, for heaven's sakes, leave it alone. There's plenty of money.
We'll wait to see till we get the proposals from the contractors that the Energy Committee
Procures an RFP.
procures, yes.
But the intent is to get the LED lighting done fiscal year 2021 in the town hall.
Matching LED lighting.
Oh, you
Color
didn't say
matching?
matching.
Color matching. Which, surprisingly enough, is easier than it used to be. I think that I've been waiting for one for the senior center for 2 years. I don't have one, so, I mean, a lighting study. So maybe we'll get one now that what's his name, whatever.
Want to take a quick look at the draft? We already know we're going to add, I'd like to see the trails one go after Article 3.
Right.
So that it's still with the revenue, but considered after the town's budget discussion.
I concur. Usually, whatever we spend is all kind of grouped together, 3, 4,
And then after that, it goes quickly, 5 and 6.
Mary's note on donations.
I still agree with, I have for years said that I don't think we should be using taxpayer money to give to charities of whoever sends in a request.
Well, Mary's suggestion, which I agree with, is that we put it as part of the annual town meeting and people can vote it up or down.
As like a separate article.
Yeah.
I think that's a good compromise. There was a relatively, a modestly in-depth discussion last year about this funding model when by accident the Charlotte News forgot to send in the request, which was the unwritten policy at the time, is when organizations had a written annual request, it was honored if it was seemed reasonable to the board. And so then it came up at town meeting to add that to a budget line item, and it was overwhelmingly accepted that was desired. So to me, that was a modest referendum on, but this would be a larger one, and I don't.
Well, I mean, I really don't know. I mean, I don't know what to do because I share Fritz's view, which is, you know, these are all worthy endeavors, but I feel I'm not willing to conscript taxpayer money.
Especially if all it takes is a written request, because then once that cat's out of the bag, what if we get 100 written requests next week? I mean, we're on TV, that might happen.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing when we first came on board, and we have these letters in our boxes, most of these funding requests from nonprofit organizations are ones that have direct services in town, and in their funding requests, they usually highlight the specific numbers. The VNA was the largest. How many home visits so they are doing direct services to residents and are asking, you know, the town as a whole for a donation. This model will offer less opportunity for that explanation to the taxpayer.
Well, I mean, if this issue has been settled,
I don't think so. I think it's been in flux the 5 years I've been on, and this would be the 6th, and
before that even.
Or, I mean, the other option is to not put it in an article, but to take these one at a time and try and make some decisions about them. I mean, I'm
Just in the, at town meeting, line by line.
well, would take it half a day.
Well, somebody on the floor would have to ask the question, and nobody asks the question. Because if you have this as a separate article, it highlights those in
Yeah.
the discussion.
I mean, there was this, when I first mentioned this, like, I don't know, what, 3 or
First
4 years
year,
ago,
yeah, 4 years
someone told me that historically there had been a whole thing where they had discussed it at town meeting and decided this is how it was gonna be approached, and there always had some, but since that time, the amount of requests has gone up significantly. So, I mean, that's kind of like the trail thing, and maybe it's time to put it as an article and get renewed instruction from the voters as to how, if we want to keep doing this and what the criteria may be or how it might change.
Well, not only that, but they could discuss it and they could zero out these during the article discussion, and then when it's voted on in April, that's what we get.
Okay, is that okay? I mean, we'll,
So we'll draft an article.
So Mary provided one that's, I think, was out on the town clerk's listserv. I guess the only problem I would say is, not that I disagree, but it's more difficult to see the ultimate tax impact if you're listing, I don't know if it's required that we list all the different agencies. If it's possible to just say, total dollar amount for donations.
How much of that is because it's going to take up 3 pages?
Well, that's true. I mean, I think, I guess what is nice about.
I remember it being about $25,000.
Okay.
Like plus or minus, that's about what the donation line item was.
Yep.
Mary might have it in NIMRIC. And then about $90,000 was 1 cent increase
Right.
per 100.
Right.
So that was That was 90,000 turns into, sorry, give me a second.
So actually the current number is 17,900 or 18,000.
It appears to have gone down because we took that child services out and made it a separate number.
That
So
could
if you
be true,
put that
yeah.
7 or 8 grand back in, it's about the same as it was last year.
So say 25,000 divided by 90,000 is 0.278%, or 27.8%. And thank you, but I'm trying to get it into dollars. So on a $500,000 home, you're talking about a $13 contribution to fund all of those nonprofits. My argument from day one on the board and every year is that doesn't seem like an unreasonable ask for organizations that have direct services in town, for this board to put that into the budget. But for some people that is on a $500,000 home. It's a $26 ask on $1 million home. So that seemed reasonable to me, and it didn't seem like it warranted changing the system, but I'm happy to do what the board wants.
I don't think it's
It's not whether or not it sounds like it's a reasonable number. It's about the select board making a decision for all taxpayers on how their taxpayer dollars should be allocated. So people should have a choice. So maybe I don't mind spending $13 for all those, but I would want it all to go to costs instead of, so so if it wasn't in our tax.
The political discussion around that value judgment is the $40,000 tax bill on that home. This is $13 of it, that the select board is being asked to manage. And to me, that's a responsible amount to allocate towards nonprofits providing direct services. It's one value judgment, and 5 of us get elected, and it's a rotating schedule, and those values change. And that's the representative democracy. There's a direct democracy, which would be putting it up every year as an article that's warned, and other towns do that. Some towns have, I don't know, 20 articles because they want the direct democracy. Everyone has an opinion. I'm happy to try new things.
Well, we're asking them for other things, trails, and I think it's time to do this one too.
Yeah.
See how the town feels.
So that would be drafting Article 6.
And would that articles be a list, or would it be just an end number?
With a list attached or something, or reference?
Well, I mean, if the question is brought forward, the list could be brought out to adjust the list, and that would adjust the number. But I mean, to have it in the article, I mean, you probably just have the end number of what the donations would be. So it would be a shorter article.
You could just ask if the town wants the select board to make charitable contributions on their behalf.
Of a certain amount of money that was requested.
I mean, I still like the bar of the select board accepting those requests based on whether they're reasonable or not. That's the gatekeeper of putting those requests forward, that it's not just an open-ended gate. We need to receive a letter every year, evaluate whether it seems pertinent to the town and to the people in town, and then presenting this as an article.
I would hope that would be part of the discussion that happens at the town meeting. Exactly how do you want us to do this, and should we limit the funds? And
the other thing is, like Frank's saying, we could have a short article that then references a page number in the town report. And we could have this, so people could then, people like going to it, and looking at it and saying, oh, page 17, let's look at those organizations. And someone says, I make a motion to strike Visiting Nurse Association from $9,000 to $50. And then that gets debated and voted or not. But that way people can have it in front of them.
Right.
And do the budgeting, which used to happen a lot more at town meeting.
I agree with that.
Line item budgeting.
Right, and
when I was
that
a
way they could
kid, that happened all
vote
the time.
on, then once it was all adjusted, then the article could pass with the adjusted amount to go on to the April vote.
Right. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Is it okay to run this past the town attorney, the language?
Oh, yeah, please.
Okay.
There was one thing, it says, shall the town appropriate the sum of blank to be raised by property taxes to be distributed as specifically requested from the following agencies? Because it's no longer the select board asking it. It's asking the town if they want to accept these requests from these agencies. I think that's the structural difference of putting an article to the town versus embedding something in the select board's budget. As this becomes the town's decision versus the select board's.
And instead of saying the following agencies, it would refer to maybe agencies to be identified, or agencies identified in a...
Within the town report, maybe on a specific page if we happen to know.
Yeah, specifically requested by,
As listed.
by the agencies.
As listed on page. Whatever it is.
Are they all nonprofits? I mean, is any one of these not a nonprofit? I kind of think that was part of the Front Porch Forum.
They haven't requested this year, actually.
And they're the only for-profit in here.
Yeah.
So then I would put in the nonprofit.
Okay.
Yeah,
Language in
I
there.
was leaving nonprofit part out of it, but just these agencies had requested it, so. But,
I'm happy either way.
but I'm happy to have it.
I mean, to me, it's the charitable donation.
Right.
To me, that's like the most important part for the discussion.
Okay.
Just out of curiosity, will the letters that each of these organizations presented to the select board be available at town meetings so that they can come up on a screen, so if somebody asks,
It could be
they can
referenced.
see what that
I
is?
mean, I usually do put them on the website, not in the town report, but the screen, I mean, we don't have that screen up constantly at town meeting. It would be for
But
someone.
since it's a separate article, we could put the screen down, and if somebody was asking, they could be there. They should be someplace other than the town website.
I agree. Maybe we could look at, is there enough room on either of the cinder block walls to the left and the right of the stage to set up a projector?
That would be a technical challenge.
In 2019? 2020?
Should be broadcast on everybody's phone.
Yes, I think it should, those letters should be available. They are informative.
Down to the bottom, I was noticing the bottom two line items. And
Well, the
it
Heinsberg
piqued
is,
my interest as to.
The
why
Heinsberg
we
is-
supported-
Heinsberg went away. They withdrew.
they withdrew their request.
Winooski NRC is a regional organization.
We withdrew all of ours from other towns also.
So what is the Winooski NRC?
They are, I think it's the park, yeah, it used to be the Park District. I have to look into exactly what they do, but it's not based in Winooski. It's the Winooski River Watershed, I think. Natural resource, I'm not sure what exactly, but I'll provide it on a.
Okay, great.
Okay. That's good progress there.
And I'm going to raise this issue again, so I'll make it really quick. The article on transacting other business, I have a major concern about issues not being warned, brought up at the very end of a meeting with no documents handed out and being, and it just kind of gets sprung on people. And that gives me a great deal of due process problems. I know Charles is the moderator, the town moderator, so but I'll leave that for later, but I just wanted to raise that. You'll hear more from me.
Like at the next meeting later?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah, no.
next year? Next meeting?
Your next select board meeting. 'cause
Okay,
we're
great.
kind of out of time.
When you look at this, it's technically the town's meeting, and we are just attendees. So
Right.
we show up and ask questions.
And agenda setters, through this,
Yeah.
the article process. But yeah, right, we're attendees and
I guess one.
references for
One
information.
thing I heard, which doesn't totally address it, but maybe a little bit addresses it, is I don't believe that article can be binding on the select board if someone,
Yeah, but that's- Yeah.
I know it's still
No.
a surprise, comes up as a bit of a surprise.
Well, it comes out as a surprise, and then it's leveraged by whoever did it as the town approved this. So,
Right.
I'm sorry.
And
it's a pet peeve.
advertised, yeah.
Is that advisory motions? Or no, those can be, that's not just advisory.
Motion to instruct the select board to write a letter.
Oh,
Type.
those ones, right.
Those ones,
Yeah.
It's fine.
that the town supports it. Well, no, nobody
No.
knew this was coming up.
And no chance to see what the motion is,
No chance for discussion
no
other than
chance for discussion.
for
Okay.
people to show up because it wasn't warned.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, okay, I'll get off that horse for right now.
Bring it up again.
Well, I thought the appropriate answer would be no thanks.
Table the
I
motion.
declined.
Okay.
So we'll have a draft in the approval next time, maybe.
What's that?
Have a revision.
Yep.
And approval hopefully next time.
Hopefully a final draft.
Nice.
Personnel policy?
So, just, I guess, the opinion of most of the employees in the town hall is that the day after Thanksgiving would be, most of them take it anyway, and they, I guess, were wondering whether that could be made a holiday, not necessarily an additional holiday, but in replacement of another holiday. But it's not clear what other holiday would be appropriate to eliminate.
Wasn't Veterans Day discussed?
Veterans Day was discussed.
Is that the most popular one that you all discussed?
Some felt that would be appropriate.
Because something to do with the clerk and
The
taxes.
clerk normally works that day because it's near when taxes are due.
Bennington Battle Day?
It's a state holiday. It is. I mean, state offices are closed.
State offices are closed. Are
Right.
other towns closed?
I don't know how many are or not. It's a good question.
What about Christmas? Why don't we just swap it out?
I mean, in the policy, it says, other holidays, regular employees who wish to observe a holiday that is not established by the select board shall be given the option to use leave without pay, vacation leave, or a personal day. That doesn't cover this. Like, people aren't expected to come to work on Friday.
I think they are expected unless they want to use vacation, personal, or go without pay, which, I mean, in most cases, it's usually not, I would say it's usually taken as either vacation, personal, in most cases, vacation or personal.
The library has it as a holiday.
They usually
And
do.
the senior center has it as what?
I don't believe they do have it as a holiday.
The day after Thanksgiving. But the library does have different days.
How many?
I think there are 12.
The library votes on what days they want to do.
There's 13.
Sure. Their board.
Well, but 2 half days.
Town hall wants to too.
So 12 holidays.
Cool.
What's the,
Right, to 2
what's
half
the
days.
vacation and sick? Is it?
For the first 5 years, it's 2 weeks. For the next, for next 5 years, it's 3 weeks, and 15 years, it's 15. It's
3
3
personal
weeks.
days a
4
year,
weeks.
and what is it? Is it 3 personal days a year?
2.
2.
And vacation leave includes sick day, or that's what the personal is? Personal is sick?
Sick is in addition to.
How many sick?
It accrues, actually it says in here.
60 hours?
96 hours per year.
40, 80.
And that one, the personal and the vacation have a limit to when you have to use them. Sick accrues indefinitely.
It does, yeah. So 2.4 hours a week accrues sick.
Well, I have a bit of a concern about not having the town offices open on that Friday for people who want to do business with the town. Maybe that's, maybe that's not maybe that isn't a concern, but just, that's my concern.
I think valid concern, but the reality of a town hall this size is even if there's one person working in planning and zoning, they're not going to be able to issue dog licenses or take your taxes, or, you can drop off your taxes, but they're not going to be able to help you in any other department except for planning and zoning.
So I'm looking at, if you've worked here 2 weeks full-time, you get 12 paid holidays, 10 vacation days, and 12 sick days that accrue, which is 34 paid days off. And then this is a request for a 35th day.
Well, it could be.
Or a swap.
Yeah, swap.
Okay.
I think most of the people indicated they would prefer a day after Thanksgiving instead of Veterans Day.
Instead of veterans.
So they like to celebrate Bennington?
It's the only holiday in August.
It's murky waters. Tread lightly.
That's when you order Bennington Battletinis and celebrate.
Swap Veterans Day for Thanksgiving, the day after Thanksgiving. Come on. What are we gonna do? What's the big deal?
What's the big deal?
What is the big deal about it?
I don't know. Is there a reason why Veterans Day is a holiday? Is it a national holiday?
Yes.
That's the reason why we're all here and have our freedoms?
I have total respect for it. It's just the reality is on Veterans Day, the clerk needs to work because of taxes anyways. Getting the taxes. Not a big deal.
I'm open to suggestions.
There it is.
We either add a day or the selection of which days could be done by vote. I just say no thanks. People have the option to take it off. They can use a day of vacation, a personal day, or they can get the I'm sick of going to work flu and not show up.
Dean, can you remind me of the town policy? Does the town pay out accrued time at the end of the year, or it rolls over?
For vacation or sick?
Yes?
For vacation, you can accrue up to, for example, if you normally get 2 weeks of vacation, you can accrue up to 3 weeks total before you don't accrue anymore. For sick time, you can accrue it indefinitely. So you.
And people can, but they can't use sick time in the policy for the holiday. That's the one thing omitted. You can use leave without pay, vacation leave, or personal day, but not sick. I'm just trying to see if you have a sense of if any of the accrued time in general goes unused. And we can amend the policy to let people use what they aren't using.
I think everyone uses their vacation and their personal days, and some of them use their sick days regularly and some of them don't.
Some people have no sick days by the end of the year.
I haven't seen anyone who has no sick days.
Because it's kind of a sick of working day, Friday after Thanksgiving.
I would want it off if I could have it off.
Who wouldn't?
Sure.
Black Friday flu.
Right.
Turkey flu.
Doesn't seem like we're interested in giving an extra
Shelburne
day
gets
out,
it off.
so I don't think there's another choice.
Or maybe Bennington Battle Days is a thing of the past.
Well, it's still a state holiday.
It is.
And if it hadn't been for Bennington Battle, we would all be speaking English.
All right.
French.
Well, Indigenous Peoples' Day is a state holiday, and we work on that day.
True.
I would just say that we weren't interested in giving another day of vacation, and if they come up with a consensus different than these, we're more than happy to accept it.
I would do that, and or with other holidays, add that people could use their sick time. That's currently not available to them to use that.
Like we know.
No, but, you know.
Got a note from the doctor.
Why don't you want to change it?
I just don't like the option of taking away Veterans Day.
If we're gonna change the holidays, let's let the employees weigh in.
Should be an article.
How do you get a census of, we can get a census of what the employees want, or what day they're willing to give up. You know, pick
Sure.
from 1 to 12 and rate them all. I mean, I guess it would have to be under, you know, certain days that would only be, I mean, unless you made, we'll say like Bennington Battle Day or Memorial Day or some day, not only say what it is, but call it a floater too, and then they can use it.
I think we did have a floating holiday before, and I think it was found, I forget now whether it was NIMRIC or the auditor, it became problematic, so it was.
They didn't know what year it was in?
Well, it's gonna screw up payroll, make it harder to do. I just think that if we should, say, if you wanna change the days, pass it around the office and let us know what you want.
And that would be library.
The library has board,
Senior center?
does different holidays, and they meet every year and determine what their 12 holidays are gonna be.
Senior center has some different holidays?
They mostly follow this, well, that's not entirely true. They don't. They do have different holidays.
Places are different.
Yeah. Not that, you know, just throwing this out there, not that it was advocated for, but another possibility would be to add a personal day, and employees could use that for the day after Thanksgiving.
Well, if we're gonna add a day, we could just add that day, but I didn't think there was a consensus here to add an additional holiday to the paid holiday to the program.
Right, why mess with personal days and sick days and everything if we're just gonna add another?
Yeah, if we're getting another holiday, just add that
Basically,
as
give them another day off with pay. You might as well just give them the Thanksgiving day, Friday after Thanksgiving off.
bah humbug.
I'm more open to that than taking away Veterans Day.
Really? You can still celebrate the veteran that comes through the door.
I mean, I still think there shouldn't be any kid in school on town meeting day. It's a state holiday. And
I agree.
if we don't make the time and carve it out, people don't remember it.
Anybody want to give another holiday?
I'd be.
Another day off?
Yeah, it's another compromise.
No.
Straw poll? No.
No.
No, 3 no's. No additional paid day off. So now we're down to the question of what days that we're gonna have.
So ask them, why don't you ask?
That's what I'm
Like,
saying, ask them, give them the
go
list
for
and
it.
say, what are your desires? And we'll tally it up and majority will rule.
There you go.
So there's a little bit of a time issue here, and that the administration of the payroll changes as at the end of the year, or as with the new year, and the cycle of holidays gets, reset. So the clerk needs to know if there's going to be 13 holidays or 12 holidays, or which the holidays.
It sounds like there'll be 12.
Okay.
Which one is subject to change based on employee vote?
Can you, if that's definite, can you do a motion in that, to that respect? And that way you wouldn't, it would go into effect based on the vote?
We can do a motion and designate the dean to collect the results. And review them with the chair. Assistant chair.
So basically-
Carrie, she's not here.
I like that.
that's basically a motion to maintain the 12 holidays with an adjustment by employee vote on which holiday may be.
This should be interesting.
Do you want to say majority vote of the employees? So, I guess if there's.
Is it majority or plurality? It has to be more than half or just the highest vote getter? The highest vote getter would be plurality.
Well, I think to do budgeting, I mean, basically, if as long as we're keeping the same 12 days, I don't know.
Should be the same
That
difference.
doesn't matter what the actual date is.
Not to Mary,
For
right.
administration, I'm not sure.
So I think if we made a motion just to maintain the 12 holidays.
Okay.
Maintain 12 holidays and to amend section 5.32 after it's been decided by the town employees.
Yeah.
Second.
Oh, I made that motion?
Getting late, folks.
Yeah.
Getting silly.
But we're almost halfway through.
Almost halfway.
Are we waiting for Carrie?
You don't have to.
All those in favor? Indicate saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Carrie.
401.
That was strategic, I think.
Yeah, it was definitely strategic. We'll see if the 4th of July gets erased from the holidays.
What'd you decide?
Let them pick their own as a group.
Basically to keep the 12 holidays so there's no adjustment to the budget.
Contract with StageWorks for providing sound system for town meeting. They are a sole preferred vendor, I think, on our list.
Yes, correct.
I would move that.
How much is it?
Second.
1,006.
It's on the back.
Any discussion? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Wow.
5-0.
No.
Thompson's Point leases. Do these have to be individually moved?
No, not necessarily.
We've done them in a group before.
They do have to be signed, though.
What's that?
They have to sign.
By everyone?
By the chair?
No, just the judge.
Make a motion to approve the Thompson's Point leases as presented in the Select Board agenda for Monday, December 16th, 2019, the 8:45 PM.
I'll second that.
And authorize the chair to sign.
Right, maybe just have the minutes actually list them.
List them in the record.
Yeah. I did.
So we got lot 28, lot 136, lot 162, lots 54 and 55, lots 159, 160, and 161, lots 178, 179, and 800, or 800 North Shore Road, and lot 198 plus, plus means.
Is there discussion?
Just that lot 198 for determination and then an approval of a new lease is basically a conveyance to a family member.
Noted. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I'm going to sign these when we approve warrants tonight, but it's just, I've signed on the wrong line before and it's take a little time to do that. Minutes. December 9th minutes, I guess is.
Yeah, that's what
We have those.
Motion to approve the minutes of December 9th is maybe amended?
I'll second that.
And the red lines are yours, Steve?
They are,
It's
yes.
edited?
Yes, they are.
So on 374, shouldn't it say submitted by Lynn and edited by Dean? Or how's that work?
I guess they're a draft for your consideration. You may disagree with the edits, and then,
Not approve it.
right.
I just didn't understand how that worked. If you needed to clarify that somebody else would, I see what you're saying.
All those in favor of the minutes as amended, indicate by saying aye.
Say aye.
Aye. Opposed? Should I vote? Okay. The select board updates, is that for public?
I will report that Dean and I met for, what, about an hour, Dean, with Dene, what's his last name? Harvey, okay. But I think we should have that should be an executive session because it involves pending litigation. And we can do that now, we can do it in January.
Okay, there's a 9 o'clock personnel discussion that does require executive session. If there's no other business before the board,
Let me just ask, there's not another really need to meet in December. So next meeting is January 13th. As far as the COLA goes for payroll, that comes out on January 15th. So we'll be, maybe close to knowing what it is, but the December number won't be out until the 15th, so.
we'll need to meet on the 23rd
Yeah.
December.
of January.
27th, I think. 27th is a Monday.
Sorry,
Yep.
27th, or the 20th.
Yeah, that's true.
It's Martin Luther King.
20th is Martin Luther King.
That's a town holiday.
It is a town holiday.
Maybe.
For now, that's true.
Scooter, I love the tie.
Okay, so state, well, we have a January 27th anyways.
Yes.
That's not too late for,
For a town report, that's okay.
okay.
Yep.
Good deal. So that's a regularly scheduled meeting.
I was curious if Dr. Andrea Regan's husband got in touch with anybody else besides me
No.
after last week's meeting.
The only person I heard from was Ben Mason.
Okay.
Didn't hear from anybody.
Oh,
Nobody wants to talk to me.
I didn't hear from anybody either. Those initials FT that just turned people off.
Really?
Okay. No other businesses expected to be passed after executive session. Thank you.
So make a motion to go into executive session?
Second. Personnel discussion.
All in
So
favor?
moved. Yeah. Aye.
Aye.